And 2 hours later, thank you for coming. This is the She-Wolves of Winter. I'm Old Nan. This is Lady Ashley, and we have ladies hiking, Lady Steffie coming on in shortly. We thank y'all for coming. We're going to do a review of Game of Thrones. Um, why Bran, and how does he get there? We appreciate you bearing with us. This is a little bit late, and we've been having some computer difficulties. But thank you so much for being here. Ashley, you want to say something?
Hi, everybody. I'm Ashley, Lady Ashley from the Iron Underneath. It's so good to be here with my ladies, and it's good to see all of you. I hope you join the chat pretty soon. I'm sure you will. As always, you're always so good to us. So, once again, we're going to discuss Bran, but this time it'll be a bit different because of the ending of the show. And hopefully, we can shed light on something here, I hope, before as we wait on the long wait for the winds of winter to make up for season 8. Steffi, you notice you're back. You want to introduce yourself?
I suck at introducing myself. Hi everybody. Yeah, just I want to know why Bran. So let's get this started. Sorry, it's been like 2 hours and I've been drinking, so that's my excuse.
Why Bran?
Uh, what do you think about Bran? I know he's got the green seer abilities and
We've had
everything, but
massive difficulties here, technical difficulties, and we've been taking shots through it.
that's for sure. But I went back and looked at some of our other things we've done, and we've done massive works on Bran. I mean, we really covered Bran a lot. We knew he was destined for great things, but not the throne. I don't think any of us ever thought that he would be the one sitting on the throne. Maybe Lord of Winterfell at some point, but I don't think any of us could conceive of him being on the throne and ruling the kingdoms. And the thing that I went back through was a lot of the Law of the Jungle. We talked about that. And one thing that stuck out was fight alone and afar. Lest the pack be diminished by war, which is kind of what happened to the Starks when you get into the Wolves. The pack was diminished because of war. You lost Rob and the Shaggy Dog one, Rickon, because of war. And so that, and then a little bit on Ravenlore, and I'll let y'all go on from there and see what y'all think, what I have to say.
I'll go next. I love the way you just introduced that, Nan. It's perfect because I think that's the key of Bran is he a green seer or not? Because Bloodraven was called the last green seer always, right? So Bran doesn't have the color of eyes that green seers are said to have, like Leaf says. Green seers have yellow eyes, green eyes, and red eyes, like Ghost, like Jojen, like Bloodraven. But they don't have blue eyes, which Bran has. And I've always wondered that, and it's always been in the back of my head why. And I think the reason why, which we'll get to later, it has everything in the world to do with Bloodraven. Because he is the kingmaker. He has been affecting succession as when he was alive in a big way. And through sorcery, through whatever methods he could, through killing Aenys Blackfire, whatever it might be. And then I think he went beyond the wall and kept doing the same thing. And when his time came, he knew he had to pass it down to someone. And who better than a Stark? Because there were no good Targaryens left, I think, in his eyes. So that raises the question for me, why did he not bring Daenerys to his cave? So Steffie, I'll let you talk for a bit. I just want to also say we have done so many things about Bran, and it's kind of funny, but I guess we were onto something. Because we just kept looking into him and looking into him. He's the one that counts the seasons, that counts the moons, that counts the constellations, that, you know, he's noticing all this stuff in the darkness, and that opens your third eye. So with that, sorry, Steffie, I just had to say that last thing.
You can continue, because I'm writing notes to what you guys are saying, but I did have the same. If you want me to continue, do you want me to continue? Just nod. Yes.
Yeah,
okay,
please.
So
Please
yeah, so when I looked up like the green seer, I did have the same, like the physicality of it, right? It was red, green, and yellow eyes, right? That's what Leaf or whatever that, like that other Children of the Forest says, Snow something they call her, Snow Led or whatever. But like, for who's better than Bran to be king? I feel like if Bloodraven was interfering in succession on who would rule, I feel like he diddled around with a bunch of people, especially Euron. And I feel like in the winter we'll get more information on that, right? Because he did say the same exact things as Bran, like, oh, I will fly, I will do this. Like, what if I jumped out of a window and flew and stuff like that? So I'm not quite sure that Bran was the ultimate choice. I just feel like he was the last ditch resort, almost. Like he wasn't meant to be, right? It was just like who was convenient for him, almost. Yeah, that's how I feel. I also, but like I'm also biased here. Like I don't agree that Bran should be king, right? From like, so like I did watch our old stream, right? And like I was saying all these positive things about Bran, and I do believe those positive things, right? Like I do believe he's the least hubris character out of all of them, like the most modest.
Yeah.
But like it's just, yeah, I just don't agree with it. Okay.
I was gonna. I'm sorry, Ash. You want to go ahead? What I was going to say was another thing was that the three-eyed raven may be different from a green seer. It may be something in totally different, because when John saw Bran for the first time, he says, "Well, you're a man now," and Bran says, "Almost man." So is he even human? Still human, or partially human, or has his genetics been altered by the tree and the drinking of the Jojen paste or whatever, and the process that he's gone through in order to become the three-eyed raven? And as far as Euron, what you were saying, Steffi, he probably did try to do some work with Euron at some point. Evidently, somebody had, for Euron to have come up with some of the stuff he's come up with. But Euron, to me, would have been a character who would have turned against whoever made him, like the White Walkers turned against the Children of the Forest. And I think that with Euron's disposition, personality, that would have been pretty evident that he would have been another danger to the people, to the realm, to the world. Okay, and that's all on that part.
Ash, do you want to go or I can go? Okay, I have the quote here. Hold on, let me get.
Thanks, Nan. That's awesome, because I agree. And you're right, Steffi. It wasn't. Yeah, I can go, but
We have a lapse here somewhere. I think that we were talking about Euron, and another thing that brought me back was the Varamir Six Skins.
Oh,
Is
okay.
it
Sorry.
because Bran is born?
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's one of my
That
favorite.
is that changed him? Is that one of the best?
The skin changing into Hodor.
Yes.
What Hagon says is an abomination. I think that has something to do with it, don't you? I mean, I feel like this is something that's been, it's been a. Sorry, I just got distracted by the Game of Thrones calendar for this year. I haven't even looked at it, and it's a Child of the Forest, and it's really cool. Anyway, sorry. I think it's tied in very much with Euron, and we see that in that great conversation with he and Victarion when he comes back and he's in his like velvet robe and it's open and Victarion's going, "That's obscene. Would you shut your robe?" And he's going, "But what if we could fly from some tall tower? And has anyone ever tried? Maybe we could. Why can't we just fly?" And Victorian's going, "I think you're out of your mind. He's got blue lips and he's rambling about flying out windows and out of tall towers." But that's where Bran fell from, was the broken tower. And I feel like if it wasn't Bloodraven, it was what I think of is Odin and Loki. Like Bloodraven is Odin. He's the All-Father. He's the last Green Seer. And then there has to be a Loki to his Odin. You know what I'm saying? Not necessarily that he is Odin, because he's a bit of a flip on Odin like George always does. But he's also, there has to be somebody else, if you know what I mean. Like the counterpart, the other side of Bloodraven that's been calling to people too. So I almost wonder if there's a three-eyed crow and a three-eyed raven, because Bran does in the book see a crow, not a raven, which is probably a concept from George that means, because and in Welsh means raven, but it actually in Celtic it means raven. In Welsh it means crow. So it's very different, and crows are raven and ravens are very different. So I'd looked up something probably for a video before about Bran and the meanings and symbols of seeing crows. And the first thing he saw when he was in his coma was the three-eyed crow. And that symbolism means crossing over from our world into the next, which is kind of into the other world, which to me is the wall and the veil that stands at the wall, where you go from kind of the known world to the other world, or the underworld, where the dead live. It's a sign of someone knowing how, or someone about to pass away, which is right about the time that Ned gets beheaded. It's also rebirth and becoming anew, or going inward or outward. And Bran definitely goes inward and outward. They take a journey, but he does go inward by opening his third eye. So also shedding and awakening the highest form of your higher spirituality. And that is the Green Seer. So also the crow guards us from within, will often visit you at a time of great change, and it's a sign that you must let go of the old in order to embrace the new. So that in your time of transition, the crow goes with you as a guardian and protector. So it almost makes me wonder if Howland Reed had something to do with this, behind his children, sending them to Winterfell, because he might have had green sight as well as Jojen did. Maybe that's where Jojen got it from. So it made me think of Howland Reed and why Jojen and Mira did come to Bran, because otherwise, without them, I don't think he would have made it all the way to the cave or even known where to go. It was Jojen's green dreams, along with Bran's three-eyed crow dreams, that or coma, sort of. I guess they're a form of green dreams, but they were sent to him definitely by Bloodraven. But then he gets there and asks, "Are you the three-eyed crow?" And Bloodraven says, "I've been many things. I've been a crow," which means he was a black brother of the Night's Watch. But it doesn't mean he's a crow. He's a three-eyed crow. It means he doesn't know what Bran's talking about. He says, "Are you the three-eyed crow? I've been many things. I've been a brother who hated his brother and loved his sister in Bitter Steel and Shira Seastar. I've been many things. I've been Brendan Rivers." And then the blackfish comes up because his name's Brendan. And he says, "Yeah, he must have been named after me." So it's interesting that how it all fits together and how it all got to Bran and how the reeds play into it and how history plays into it. Because as we see, I think we've come full circle now, back to the Age of Heroes and the Long Night again. So if anybody else wants to go for a minute.
Go for it, Steffie. I see you nodding your head.
Please.
Okay.
What got me was
Okay, no,
go
Cynthia,
ahead.
You go.
What I thought of when I did some research myself was that when you look up the ravens and the crows and everything, you can't do history. You can't do research on them without coming up with the fact that they have almost a symbiotic relationship with wolves. And that where you see the wolves, you will see the crows. Even the crows will even look for the prey for the wolves. And the wolves help them because the wolves tear the hide. They can't tear the hide with their beaks as well. But once the hide gets torn, the hair and all pulled back from it, then they can get to the soft meat underneath. And so throughout the years, they have had a symbiotic relationship. So Bran has gone from being a wolf to a crow now. And that kind of makes a full circle of the whole thing to me. Go ahead, Steph.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously I'm not mythology folklore buff like Ashley is, but
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. But like, if I were to go into what you said Ned gets beheaded, right? For like, and that's to symbolize this raven or crow, right? And then this is where my issue comes from, right? Is the warg, the skin changer, the green seer, and then the green sight, and how to me in my head, I always figured they were separate and that they were different or like at least different degrees of each other. So when Bran sees Ned like dying, right, the green sight and stuff like that, Rickon also sees it, and he goes down to the crypts with Shaggy Dog, right? So like, to me, it's almost like Rickon would have had a better understand. And I don't know what Rickon's color eyes were. I don't think they were the regular color. If I'm mistaken. I think they were different colored. Hold on. Let me look it up quickly.
Was it gray?
I think Rickon's eyes are green.
Yeah, he has bright blue eyes, auburn hair, and then the easy smile of the Tully. So he's basically almost the same as Bran, right? But Bran has that darker auburn or whatever. The same with Sansa. So he still has the blue eyes. So like, if you were gonna choose, right, which brings it down to like physicality, right? Like, was Brendan Rivers always like that, or was it because he lost his eye that he developed his third eye, which is the reason why Bran developed his gift after he got crippled, right? Like, I like, and if that's the case, and let's say if Bran was set up by this thing, and Jaime pushed him because Brynden Rivers entered his body, or skin changed into it, and pushed him out, then why wouldn't he do something equally or more so as bad to Rickon? Rickon, who is a child who could be more easily manipulated, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like he left it off. Howland, I liked your point about Howland and about him having green sight. I definitely believe that. Like, why would he go to the God's Eye all of a sudden and then go to the Tourney of Harrenhal, right? And then finally meet up with Lyanna Stark and the Stark family and then do the whole thing, right? Like, it kind of makes sense why he would sort of have green sight, and then why Jojen would have green sight. And green sight also allows you to see your death as well. So it's almost like, is Howland not partaking in the events of A Song of Ice and Fire because he sees his death within it? And that's why he's not partaking in it. And that's why he's not like influencing the story enough, right? Because that's a huge thing, right? And maybe that's the same with Bran as well, right? Like why he wasn't as involved later on. Like, he was just like nodding his head saying it's your choice to do this, right? It's not mine, right? It's almost like he was like trying to distance himself away from decisions where it would impact his death, like almost like he saw it. And to Cynthia's point, where you see the wolves, you see crows.
Yeah, just like Bran did with Theon. Yeah.
Bran did with Theon? Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
yeah, that's cool. I like that. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to make a comment. Please go on.
I only got like one more. So it's to Cynthia's point, where you see wolves, you see crows.
I am lapsing. I'll restart while you go on. I'm sorry.
Everyone's leaving me. Okay. I'm all alone. I've been singing this all night. So when you see the wolves, you see the crows, the symbiotic relationship Cynthia brought up. When Euron's at the Kingsmew, you see seagulls, right? And seagulls also eat fish and stuff like that, which is also the skin changer thing, which brings up Leaf and the Green Seer all over again, right? And like, if I'm gonna choose someone to be violent, and like maybe Euron snapped somewhere. Like, where did he snap? Right? Aeron Damphair isn't explained in the show at all. I think he's shown like twice or whatever. And they completely skip over him. So he says like he hears the slamming of the doors and then he changes, right? Which would have been in Bloodraven's time between him taking the Werewood throne to when he found Bran in this story. So it's definitely something to think about. But I think Bran wasn't the first choice. He can't be the first choice, though.
I think it could have been generational, that every generation of people, the first men or whatever, may have a seer or whatever in each generation. There's going to be some that come out with powers, just like you had Jojen. He was weakly and sick and all too. So there's a lot of them that are being chosen are the punier ones, the frail people. And for some reason, that's who they choose. And I don't think that Rickon would have been a good choice. I know he would have been more easily swayed and all, but he already got the same information that Bran was getting. But he went on a different journey, and he may have been a backup for Bran if something happened to Bran. But Rickon was already wild at such a young age. He was ready. He was, fight just as Shaggy Dog would fight. He would be willing to fight too. I'm sure. So there's that on me. I'll let y'all speak now.
Sorry, I think I do have a bit of a lag. I hope I'm not lagging too badly. If I am, let me know. I think it's really fascinating that the whole Rickon thing, because Rickon was down in the crypts before Bran when Ned died. He was already down there, and Shaggy came out and almost bit somebody because he was hiding, and probably Rickon was scared. Like this little was a 3-year-old little boy or 4 when this whole thing started, and Ned went south and Catelyn left and Bran went into his coma. I remember that passage with Robb where he comes into the room and says, "Mom, please, you got to help me." And Catelyn's out of her mind with grief over Bran. And he's like, he's holding on my leg and he's following me around and I don't know what to do with him. You got to take care of him. And she's like, "I'm taking care of Bran." It's almost like Catelyn's gone into another place too when she's taking care of Bran. I listened to that chapter again the other day, and it's Catelyn almost forgets like that she's the Lady of Winterfell and that she has all these duties to perform while Ned's gone and while the girls are gone, and she lays it all kind of at Robb's feet and Maester Luwin because she's just kind of in the state of immense grief, but she just sits there with Bran day and night, and she's not eating, she's not sleeping. So there's something going on with Cat too. And it's like she and Bran both are under some kind of spell. The wolves are driving her insane, but they're talking to Bran. And it's really cool because Robb comes in and says, "Mom, he needs to hear them sing." And he opens the windows and Catelyn flips out and says, "Close it. I can't stand it. They're driving me insane. They're driving me crazy. I can't stand the noise." And then right then is when the dogs start barking and the library's on fire and Robb runs out and the cat's paw comes in to kill Bran. So it's really like step by step where Catelyn, after she encounters the cat's paw and Summer runs up and, kills the cat's paw, but Cat's holding on to the blade with her hands. That's how insane she is to keep him away from Bran. Like, imagine holding on. That's a Valyrian steel blade. It really probably would have gone right through your hand. But she was holding on to the blade to keep it away from Bran. And that's pretty amazing whenever I listen to that or read it, it's like, wow, that's really cool. That's a mom, protecting her boy. And when Summer comes up and kills the cat's paw, that's when she finally trusts the wolves. And from then on, she's constantly saying, "Listen to your wolf," to Robb. And the one time he doesn't is when he gets pulled into the Spicers and Jane Westerling. In the show, it's Talissa, but it doesn't really have as much to do with Grey Wind, which is kind of a bummer. Because in the books, it has everything to do with Grey Wind. And Grey Wind's trying to warn him as he runs up towards the Westerling house, and he's in the front and he doesn't have protection around him. He thinks he's safe and he gets shot by an arrow, which leads him to Jane Westerling's bed where she takes care of him, and then he breaks his vow and has to marry her because of honor. But this was a whole setup by Tywin Lannister through Sybil Spicer, which is Jane Westerling's mother. So Tywin's involved, and Bran to me invokes Stannis sometimes too, because Stannis is like this iron at the wall at the end of A Dance with Dragons, and in the Winds of Winter, the Theon chapter, we get, or is it the, God, I can't remember this. Maybe it's the Tyrion. I can't even remember. There's a chapter.
Me and Steffie were talking about that earlier, just before you got here. When we were having technical difficulty. But I think it was Asha. Is it Asha's Winds of Winter or Theon Winds of Winter preview?
One of them, yeah. It must be Theon.
Yeah, where they're doing the holes in the ice, and Theon's
Mhm.
chained, and then you get into the Great Northern Conspiracy. So
Right. Exactly.
we'll get into that later. Yeah.
Which also has a lot to do with it. The North remembers and the Manderley Mummers farce with Davos and the whole like you're a dead man every day of his life. He's being kept at White Harbor and at Sea Dragon or at the Wolf's Den. So it's one of those things where it's all the stark symbolism everywhere you go. And also the Wyman Manderley's children are named after Rhaegar, Lyanna, Ned. I think there's a Ned. They have all like every child from almost like the tourney of Harrenhal. It's interesting how all his children are named, or I'm sorry, the Frey children that are there are named after all of those people. So it's like it's within the phrase. I don't even think they know what they're doing, but they kind of start their tradition over again, but they don't deserve it, right? And Wyman Manderley sitting there going, they don't deserve it. They don't deserve these names. So what I was thinking about too, when you said that about Euron, when did he snap? And the whole every generation of there's not many skin changers and not many green seers especially, but every generation has one. So that's because 1 in 10,000 skin changers is a green seer. 1 in 10,000 is a skin changer. 1 skin changer in 1,000 is a green seer. So you'd get a few, you know, if they had that color eyes and if they're the 1 in 1,000. And I don't know if Howland Reed can skin change. I think we would have maybe heard about that already if he could. But he definitely,
Who?
I would say Howland Reed.
Howland.
I don't know if he can skin change necessarily, but I think he has green dreams for sure. And that's what sent him to the Isle of Faces before he went to the tourney of Harrenhal. And God knows what he learned there. I'd give anything to know, because whatever it was sent him to the tourney of Harrenhal. And he was one of the only people to live getting to
I got an
the Isle of
idea.
Faces.
I have a
Yeah,
brilliant
go ahead.
one that just Howland Reed has never left since, the Tourney of Joy. I don't think anybody's seen him outside of the thing. What if you find out that Howland Reed is sitting on a weirwood throne in he is also a green seer or whatever. You've got Howland, who is a real Stark man. He's for the Starks. You've got Manderley, who is a green man. He with the Isle of Faces and all of that. So, and then you have the Grand Northern Conspiracy. So, in the books, maybe it's bound to be clearer why Bran is going to be made king. But the show did not bring anything of that, because you still have Catelyn alive, and she's going to be for Bran. So you have elements of a picture that we didn't get on the TV that you get in the books. And all of these things combined may be why we get Bran.
That is so
That's
brilliant.
just
Really.
Hold on, say that again. I feel like I missed something. Hold on. Say it again.
Oh,
Sorry.
brilliant.
Well, what I was saying, what if Howland Reed is a Stark man. He's never left the neck. And I'm sure people have seen him, but what if we were talking about him being a green sea or whatever. He has evidently some powers, because, they knocked down the Tower of Joy. How did they do that? Whatever. But, evidently he's had powers of a green side nature. I don't know whether it's skin changing or what. But you've got him there in the neck. You've got the Manderley Manderley, who is a green man who is also connected with Isle of Faces, just as Howland Reed is connected with the Isle of Faces. You have Catelyn in the Riverlands, and she would definitely support Bran or one of her children, even over anybody, you know. And then you have the Great Northern Conspiracy going on. So I can see how in the books, there's enough material in the books that you can see it where it very possibly could be Bran. All of the stuff they left out of the show, if they knew it was going to be Bran, why didn't they touch on Bran's more of the journey, the Grand Northern Conspiracy, the Manderleys, Howland Reed? They, like I said before, it was like a shell game. They had 3 options, there's 4, and they shuffled the shells. And they deliberately did not do any of the things that could have landed, that we would have seen Bran going to become king. Okay, I've rambled too long. Y'all go for it.
Okay, so I'll touch on what Cynthia said. I agree with most of it, but not all of it. Howland Stark loyalty, I get that. I do. I'm gonna go into this. If Howland is as powerful as you're assuming, I could see that, because supposedly the Children of the Forest did break the arm of Dorne, right? And then it later became the broken arm, right, of Dorne, which is where the First Men traveled over, right? But it didn't stop them from traveling, because obviously they probably had ships by that point. But like, it makes sense for Howland to have that power, right? And it also goes to the God's Eye and how he was able to somehow mysteriously get there, but no one else is able to. Like, I think there was one Targaryen that crash landed there by accident. That was basically it, right? It was like they were fighting in the Dance of Dragons, and then he just crash landed there, and then he got out, right, with his dragon. Like it was by happenstance instead of him actually seeking it out, right? Which is what Howland does. As for the Grand Northern Conspiracy, this is where I come into a problem with. Okay, so Lady Dustin, to me, wants what the Starks have, and that's the same as the Boltons. So for me, that doesn't work out, because if Howland was around when oh, I'm blanking on their names. There's so many names. Brandon Stark? Brandon Stark, right? Was, yeah, the oldest son of Lord Rickard Stark. Yeah. Okay, so
yeah,
if he's the eldest, then Howland Reed must have known that Brandon Stark, right, Bran's uncle, was like a whore, basically, like a man whore, and he was like sleeping around with a bunch of people, and he was promised to Lady Dustin before he was promised to Catelyn Stark, which, to me, I think in Howland's head, he would have been more loyal to Lady Dustin than he would have been to any Southern lord, right? And I kind of feel like Wyman Manderley would have been like, by Northern standards, would have been a Southern lord, because they escaped from the Reach to go up there, and then they were given the thing. So to me, there is a divide within the alliance of the Northern Conspiracy, like the allies and the people, right? Like, it doesn't make sense for them to be, it's almost like there was bickering within the major bickering, right? So to me, I don't think the Northern Conspiracy is as finished yet, but that doesn't play to what I'm thinking in my head, which is the Stark Conspiracy, right? Like, I feel people got to go watch the Hypes Watch to get this, because Sweet YFT, she does an explanation on this, and she brings up the Stark Conspiracy in season 8 with like Jon, Sansa, Arya, and Bran, right? Where it's not explained in the show properly, but she explains it from a book sense. And it makes sense and that's why I think Bran is chosen, right, to be king. Like, technically, he's a foreign king ruling about, like, foreigners, right? He's from the north, right? Right? Like, even the Riverlands, like, technically, you could push them off to the Vale and sever it off, like they did in the map in season 8, episode 5, or whatever, where they take King's Landing, right? You could separate that off and take Riverrun, the Twin Towers, like the phrase, and then you could take the Vale, and then you could take the whole entirety of the North, which is where it was separated, right? So, like, I have issues with the Northern conspiracy where it's laid out. That's my problem. But everything else, like, I'm adding on to your theory. But yeah, that's all I gotta say right now. I have a bunch of other stuff.
Well, you're right in that the Northern conspiracy is divided, because you do have the Boltons over there steady wanting their power, and then you have the Karstarks. So there is going to be a shifting of power. Evidently, Bran wins out. Now, I do have a theory on Rickon. If he dies in Skagos, or Davos finds him and he doesn't make it, I think that maybe Davos may run into Bran and actually help Bran get back in the books. Possibly, because he's going to be in that general vicinity. You're muted. Anyway, let you see on that.
I'll
Go
jump
ahead,
in.
Steffie.
Okay, I was
Sorry.
talking to myself, like, when you guys talk, like I'm over here talking to myself as a way to, like, emphasize what I'm about to say. It's weird. Anyways, so
I know what you mean.
So you're thinking that Davos is going to play a thing to, like, Sam was going north, that Davos is going to play going south to Bran. That would make sense to me. Depending on the way Bran goes. The way Bran went, he went from the, what is it?
Show.
No, he didn't. He went from the Night's Fort. He went from the Night's Fort. And then he went
close to Eastwatch. Yes. It's which side of Skagos is on the east or west? Skagos is on the east.
It's on the west. West, I thought.
Is it west?
Let me look. I think it's. Oh no, I might be wrong.
Hold on, I think they got a map here somewhere.
Anyway, that was my thinking. You know, he goes to see Skagos looking for Rickon. Something happens to Rickon, and in the end, he'll wind up bringing Bran back, and Bran will be the one they back. But in the show, they're making it seem like Bran can't be anything. But you don't know that in the books. Bran may have a different attitude in the books. You know. Evidently, he's playing his own game.
Sorry, Skagos is on the east. I was wrong. It's on the east.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So, yeah. He'll be up there around Castle Black.
Hold on, I'm going to interrupt you, Cynthia, because the Night Force is west of Castle Black. And Castle Black is west of Eastwatch by a long shot. Right, where it's like the Night Fort, Deep Lake, Queen's Gate, Castle Black, and then there's like another 5 things to Eastwatch. So if Eastwatch is close to where Skagos is, it doesn't make sense that Davos would make a loop unless Bran is hoping to come across. What's that lady's name? The one that was at Mother Mole, I think her name is.
Yeah, Mother Mole.
Right, unless Bran's gonna go to her next. Right, to try to catch a ship.
That's true. Hardhome, you got the whole thing with Hardhome coming out, and you know he knows that there's ships coming out. He knows what's going on. If he's gonna the 3-eyed crow at the time, at 3-eyed raven, by the time he leaves the cave, evidently that's when he's gonna become the 3-eyed raven. So because he said Hodor's death was one of George's own inventions there. So after that, when they leave, he'll be becoming the three-eyed raven, so he'll probably be more vulnerable during that time. Okay, I'll shut up now.
Okay, so I'm going to interrupt now again. I don't think Bran's going to be more vulnerable during that. Okay, it depends on like what version you're going to take. It's either Bran is going to be a god, like an old god, the moment he gets that information, the moment he like unlocks the key, or you're going to go with the show version where he's slowly downloading all this information and he's slowly losing his humanity and his passion and his empathy and apathy and like all this stuff, right? To me, I rather believe that it's like instant, because you have all the way I picture the WereNet is that you have a bunch of other green seers influencing your thought, and it's like you're taken over like that, right? It like imagine it's like schizophrenia almost, right? Like who your personality is at that moment, right? Who lived throughout this history at this moment. So I don't believe Bran's going to be vulnerable, and if that's the case, like if you're choosing Davos to go pick him up, and I could see that if Bran goes to Mother Mole. Right? I don't know if she's dead. I didn't really look. But if she...
I don't think she is, because people come up from underneath the ground, and those are the people she's keeping, I think. Right? When Sam gets to the weirwood tree and the face is changed, he's like, where are the people? And they all come out of the ground. So, yeah. I think it's roots, actually, is what I think. The weirwood roots. They just go everywhere. All the way to Winterfell, I think.
Yeah, they're all connected.
I'm gonna add here. Mother Mole is here to preach that the free folk will find salvation where once they found damnation, which means like the way Hardhome is done in the books and in the show, right? Like Jon receives that letter from Eastwatch by the Sea saying like, oh, the dead men are in the water or whatever. So to me, that's that damnation. But where they find salvation is where Dany's gonna go, right? From the next, right? I think that's the way they did it in the books. They added Dany in there somehow. So I could see Bran going like where it's located, like the estimation of where it's located, the Were throne to Eastwatch by the Sea or to Hardhome, and then catching a ride back, not knowing who's who, and then going that way. But we've also discussed the tunnels too, right? So I don't know. Maybe.
I was just going to say about the tunnels underneath the giant weirwood and that connect. You know, we've always thought that there was a tunnel that connected straight to Winterfell. I've always thought that. We don't know, in the books it might be. And one other thing is the Red Wedding may have a big to do with with why Bran gets that too. You don't think about it, but you know, when the guest rights were broken and the old gods are the ones who judge on that. And now Bran is basically an old god. So he's been absorbed into that thing. So I think the northern people, they would be for it. But the Red Wedding may be the only reason I can see for the Southerners going along with it, you know, because of what happened at the Red Wedding, and because they know that Ned Stark is an honorable man, and because he did the right thing by his king, you know, even though it cost him his head and his family and everything, you know. But that's the only thing I can come up that might influence anybody in the South to do that. And then you've got Jon and Dany, and so you've got to figure out at what point does Dany come over. And I guess we are going to get the what is the prince that was promised to do the fiery sword from a Nisa type thing with Dany's, all I know.
Azor Ahai and the Lightbringer, yeah. Yeah, that's the thing, is that's the Relorian myth, right? Azor Ahai, and then it kind of transfers to Westeros with Melisandre. So, but it seems to intertwine maybe with the prince who was promised. We don't really know. As of yet, I don't think in the books. I mean, they don't really address it in the show as much. They do the prince that was promised, but not Azor Ahai. So to me, it seems that those are really cool points, you guys, because the way I look at it too is that, you know, Bran always heard these stories from Old Nan, and it's like he was living them when they went to the Night Fort. All of it happened. The thing that came in the night, it was Sam at the bottom of the hill, at the bottom of the well, you know, with Gilly. And even the rat cook, he heard the rats scurrying around and it scared him to death. I mean, thing about Bran is like, sometimes I write for a certain site and I got a question the other day, what's the difference between Bran in the show and Bran in the books? And it's like, Bran was a scared little boy, really, is what he was. He was a tiny boy. He was 7 when this started, and then he was probably 10 by the end. So he's not very old, and he's heard these stories, and he's, you know, like you said, he sort of has led, I don't know if he's led a privileged life but he's definitely led a life that he didn't see the wars that his father saw, or any of the horrors that his father and Robert saw, you know, like children dead on the floor, the Targaryen children of Rhaegar's, or, you know, Rickard and Brandon dying at King's Landing. So what I think is so cool about this is that he might have, I'm sure he saw the Red Wedding. He would have had to have. So that's breaking guest right, which is exactly what happened at the Night Fort with the rat cook, making the Andal king's sons into pies. So it all ties into what Bran sees, and we don't know how much of this is actually something that happened before, which it probably is, but it's like he's doing the same thing Melisandre's doing when she reads her flames, but his is much more vivid, and he knows who these people are from his education from Maester Luwin and his education altogether as a lordling. He knows who Simeon Star Eyes is. He knows who Daeron Targaryen is. He knows about the wheelchair, which means he does see, you know, he does. It's not like that line in the show, oh, I don't want anymore. It's saying, I think, that he doesn't want like a human being does. It doesn't take him over. It doesn't motivate him. It just is something that he wants. And Bran wants a lot because Bran's crippled. And the first thing he says when he gets to the cave is, will you make me walk again? Are you going to be able to make me walk again? And Bloodraven says, I can't make you walk, but I can teach you how to fly. So that to me is one of the most important things altogether, because the fact that Bran's name means raven and he wargs these ravens. The thing about ravens in Celtic mythology is that, and Welsh mythology in the Mabinogion and stuff like that, is that these ravens are like, they're the skins of a skin changer, a shapeshifter. So they would be like the Valkyries riding over the battlefield and choosing the hero to come to the hall of Valhalla when they die, or the one to protect, or it could be the Morrigan at the same time. You don't know. So there's again that good and evil, not good and evil. There's one who wants one thing and one who wants another. And I think one might want the Blackfires, which could be Illyria Mopatis. But you just gave me a great idea with Lord Manderley and Howland Reed, because Manderley is called Lord Too Fat to Sit a Horse, right? So he's like Garth Greenhand all over again. He was a jolly fat guy with, you know, ruddy cheeks, and the women would all get fertile when he came around, and he was the fertility god. He had green and seeds, and it kind of seems like the seed is strong has 2 meanings. It means like planting agricultural crops and making the world come into a more agricultural sort of land instead of a hunter-gatherer sort of mentality, which is the first men, I think, graduating into another epoch and into agriculture. And then the other part of it is the seed is strong. The son looks like the father. They have the same hair color most of the time. That's how Ned finds out that Robert has all these bastards and that Joffrey is not Ned's or Robert's son. So the thing about it also is Howland Reed, that might be kind of like not the Loki to Odin, but it might be the other way around. That Bloodraven is the Loki and Howland Reed is the Odin. It's just that Howland Reed has the eye, or Bloodraven has the eyes, the one red eye and the one white eye, like Horus and like Odin. Odin lost an eye, and so did Bloodraven. And Bloodraven lost it by his half-brother Bittersteel that he hated. And Odin lost his by Baelor the Blessed, I believe. So it brings me back again to Celtic mythology, where when Ned is being beheaded, he says the word Baelor. And as we know, when every Stark dies, they say a name. Even Rhaegar said a name. And I think that might be a magical thing, like, a prophecy, or how you're going to die, maybe even. And maybe not that so much, you're dying, because Catelyn even does it, and Robb does it, but it might be something that just is inherent in a war skin changer or in somebody who's just aware that you can, whatever name you say, like John says, ghost. Bran, when he wakes up from his coma, names Summer, which I think means he's going to make it all the way around to the end of winter and killing the Night's King. But Ned says Baelor, and that's because the statue of Baelor the Blessed is in front of him where Arya is sitting, and he wants Yoren to hear that so he can look up and see Arya and grab her so she doesn't see him be beheaded and protect her. But at the same time, Baelor means something huge, and I've talked about this many times. Sorry to go over it again, but Baelor the Blessed or Baelor of the Evil Eye is what he was called in Celtic mythology, was a Nephilim giant who had an eye in the back of his head. And so the thing is Odin had lost his sons and his brothers, and he didn't want any more of his sons to be able to be killed. And so he created Balder the Beautiful, who reminds me a lot of Jon. And he said, there's no way to kill Balder the Beautiful, so don't try. Don't even touch him. But someone who was, it was the blue-eyed giant. Yeah, that they're supposedly living in, according to Old Nan. Baelor the Blessed was kind of the blue-eyed giant and the ice dragon at the same time. It's like the concept of a third eye, So it's like they follow the ice dragon to get up to the cave. Ned says Baelor when he dies, right before he dies. And I think, Sean Bean has said he was just praying, but I think he said a lot more. I really think that's going to come out, because if you say Baelor, that means that war is going to start, and Baelor is going to come out of his sleep, is what it is in the mythology. So Baelor comes out of his sleep and goes to war, but he's so big and he's a giant that everything he does kind of shakes the world. So when he gets hit in the back, in his eye, in his back eye, because he can always see in front and behind, so any army would never be able to defeat him, but somebody with a slingshot hits him in the eye, or hits Balder the Beautiful, in the eye. And then to kill Baelor the Blessed, Baelor of the Evil Eye, you have to hit him in the eye as well. And they do. And when he goes down, it causes earthquakes and volcanoes, kind of like the breaking of the Arm of Dorne and the attempt at breaking the neck. So I think this is Ned saying war. It's war. If you kill me, it's war. And that's why Robb instantly just calls the banners. Bran becomes the Lord of Winterfell. And I think the Lord of Winterfell has more to do with it than just being the Lord of Winterfell. It's like a Stark always has to be in Winterfell. Whoever the male child is at Winterfell becomes the Lord, but it's a more powerful title than just Lord. That's like a King of Winter. So it's really, I just love that you guys brought that up, because Howland Reed could be the one who's sending these messages to other people, or to try and combat Bloodraven and what he's doing, because I don't know, you know, I kind of love thinking about Bloodraven just setting up the succession and seeing all these things happen, and then Bran seeing them and saying, I can't change it. I can't do anything about it. So all these people in King's Landing are going to have to die for me to become king. That's kind of intense. But it's not his choice. It's Daenerys' choice. And it's Jon's choice whether to tell or not.
But one thing, you know, we were talking about, why would anybody in the South support Bran? If Dany's already burned out most of the South, and Bran comes to help, you know, King John, you know, whatever, the North comes and helps the South, which when he killed Dany, that did help everybody, the world, evidently. So I mean, that's the only thing I could, and the fact, like I said, that
is why.
Ned. Another thing, what you were talking about also, Steffi, about Bran being so young. Y'all were talking about him being so young, but after he becomes the three-eyed raven, he's no longer young. He's an age. He's got an eon in his mind, access to it, and he's still in a young body. And you know, like I said before, I bet they'll be planting a lot of werewoods in King's Landing. But you know, that's just it. Steffi, I know you're about ready to say something.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna jump into what Cynthia said first, because I do disagree with that. You're saying, like, I was speculating that Bran is this all-seeing God. I don't believe he is. That's my point. That's my beef with all of this. They're claiming him to be wise when he's not. Brynden Rivers, by the Children of the Forest, by Leith, by Snowlocks, and by, I looked up her name while we were doing this. So by Snowlocks, by the other Children of the Forest, is the last Green Seer. Bran is not a fully grown Green Seer. He can only do so much because he's not trained, right? Like, you're talking about, they said that Bran has the blood to be a Green Seer, but he needs this to be an actual Green Seer, to awaken his gift. It's kind of like him being crippled and him being a skin changer, right? Or whatever, right? To me, Brynden Rivers was naturally a Green Seer. He had all those previous gifts that Ashley brought up, right? Like, out of like 100,000 wargs, there's a skin changer. Out of 1,000 skin changers, there's a Green Seer or whatever. Forget the quote of it, but like, I'm pretty sure that's how it goes, right? So to me, Bran isn't the Green Seer. He's not. He was the prince that was promised. He's supposed to do all this stuff, and this is where my part comes in. If Bran is able to at least see the present or some historical events, he should be able to influence it enough to stop it. He should. It's kind of like when they were persecuting Peter Baelish, right? He said chaos is a ladder, right? If he is present through all these things, he should be able to persecute someone like that. And he's not. He's not doing it. He's not being just to his people. And it makes me sick, right? that you know all this history and you're not persecuting people that you know that are guilty, right? Right. And I understand that, like, the whole thing, and I that's my problem too, right? Like, there's, like, you could say you've committed, I forget that Tom Cruise movie, you've committed a crime, but you're going to go to jail for it now, right? Like, in the future.
Oh yeah,
Right? But then there's
right.
Bran, who's like all this fatalistic thing, and he's not doing anything because he's like, oh shit, like, I'm going to be king anyways because life is life, right? Like, screw it. Like, I'm a god. I'm going to get what I want anyways, right? It ticks me off. Right, this fatalist approach, right, to it, that like fate conquers all, right? It drives me nuts, right? Like, if I were given Bran power, go Ash.
I totally get what you're saying. I really do, because it seems like, well, that's not really fair, and why wouldn't he punish people or, you know, change things as he sees them as being wrong? But I think that's why Bloodraven, when he's teaching him, says the ink is dry. If you go back, you know, I've gone back and it's almost like he tells him, I've gone back and I've influenced things, and I've learned not to do that. Because I think that's why Bran says things like, John, it's your choice to tell them. And then he says to Theon, you're a great man, Theon. And I think that was just to get Theon to kind of give him a couple more minutes to let Arya get there so that she could get to the Night King. It wasn't quite the right time. And Bran knew it down to the second. And that's kind of the thing, I think, about the Greenseers and about Bloodraven himself. Actually, it's more Bloodraven than Greenseers, because it's not that sweet. You know what I'm saying? It's not that what we think of as a Greenseer. It's kind of awful because they can see what's going to happen, but wondering if you're going to be able to change something because you punish this person or you change that. What if you change, like, your own existence, or you change Hodor being able to hold the door, or you change somebody from not even being able to be born? I don't subscribe to the time travel theory of Bran, but I do think of, you know, I can see her mind just like, but I see time more as a, like an Yggdrasil tree, like a levels one on top of another instead of a line, you know, where certain things happen like dominoes, it goes. I see it more as like holding the door. You know, if somebody's gonna enter into something like this, then somebody's got to hold the door, and they're going to give their entire lives and most of everything they have to hold that door, because that door is the door between the living and the dead, and that door can affect you. And I think that's why he commits abominations. He lets people get away with things that you think he shouldn't let them get through. But as a god, is he really letting them, or is he just letting free will be free will? So if you want to go, Steffie, go ahead, please.
I got one thing I want to say before I forget it. Before I forget it. In the generation that George and I come up in, one of the big movies back in the long time ago was Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the original one. And when I look at Bran, I don't know if that's Bran or if it's not. You know, I have some questions. I know Bran is in there because he remembers what it's like to be Bran Stark. But where is Bran? You know, and that's another question, because it's kind of like he was body snatched in a way, and that's what this power did. This Bloodraven and them did to him. So, you know, that was just another thought. And you're right, Bran was the Lord of Winterfell at the time Ned was beheaded, and he said war, you know, Baelor. So that's a good point too. All right, that was my point. Go for it, Steffi.
Okay, so I'm gonna rebut Ashley's points. Okay, there's a difference between evidence and altering the path, like he did with Holdar. That's my beef, right? You brought up the rat's cook. Now the rat's cook find out after the thing. Would you punish the brothers or would you let it be? Would you punish Peter Baelish or would you let it be? Would you punish Bran or would you let it be? Would you punish Varys or would you let it be? Like this, it's the cycle of him abdicating his duty to justice. And I feel like that goes back to Ned Stark and him not being able to swing the sword. And that's the biggest, another big beef I have. He can't swing the sword. He's going to need a henchman to do that for him. He's going to need an executioner to do that for him. And he doesn't want to put someone in place for that. He doesn't want to put in an ill pain who doesn't have a tongue like Euron does to his entire fleet to do that. Green sight is different than the green seer ability, and this is what I'm talking about, the differing degrees that we have throughout the gifts, right? It's like when Jon sees that weirwood or whatever tree that grows in front of him, and then Bran pops out and touches the middle of his forehead and says, "You need to wake up," or whatever, right? It's kind of like that. Bran is strong, but he's strong in present tense. He's not strong in past tense where he can learn from history. Like he knows everything. And that goes to Cynthia and like Bran being a schizo, right? He's a schizophrenic. He has a bunch of like personalities conflicting with each other, right? But then how much justice is there in these other personalities? Like Brynden Rivers always wanted a just person to be on the throne, right? Like he killed a bunch of people to see Aegon the Unworthy to be, or Unlikely, or whatever his name is, to be sat on the throne, right? For these events to take place, right? For there to be an actual just ruler. Like if that's the case for a just ruler, I don't think Bran's a just ruler because of Hodor and a bunch of other stuff that's going to happen. And I'm gonna expand a little bit here. There's a theory online, and when we were taking this hiatus off, that's how I compartmentalized the show into the books, was this guy's theory, where Bran entered Jon, and Jon did it with Dany, but Jon didn't do it with Dany. It was Bran who was doing it with Dany, and thus that brings up Hagon's other rule of not sleeping with other people, right? Or not mate wolf with wolf. You're not supposed to mate wolf with wolf, right? It's kind of like forcing people to rape each other, right? Almost, right? It's like you're raping someone without noticing it, right? Like you're not that person. That's the way I'm going to be viewing that, right? And that's how it goes all the way to the end, right? That Jon is actually the one that gets announced king, but he doesn't take it and gets sent away because he kills Dany in the end anyways. That's the way I'm doing that all in my head, because I can't picture what Cynthia says, a bunch of Southerners voting for Bran, who they fucking never met, and electing him to be king. Like, who the fuck are you, you stupid, broken, crippled boy? Like, go, like, if someone were to come to me and be like, I'm gonna take over all your life right now, right? Like, I'm gonna take over your whole government, right? Because I know everything. I'm going to be like, tell me my most embarrassing moment of my life. Tell me my most, like, unjust thing that I've ever done in my life. Do that. I'm going to test you. I'm going to test you to see if you're true or not, right? And if you're not true and you're going to screw up and go left because you're going to cuck out and be like, no, I'm not going to tell that in front of a bunch of strangers because you're actually a bad person. Right? Like, let's say if I like beat up a cripple or whatever, right? Like, I'm just shooting off the thing, right? Like, I'm not going to tell a bunch of lords that you just did that, right? Like, I'm kind of picturing Caesar's thing, right? Where they all stab him, right? Like, that's why I'm picturing the Senate, right? And all these lords are present. I'm going to test you, and if you're going to screw up, right? I'm gonna kick you out. No, I'm not voting for you. Right? That's how I feel. Yeah, that's all my points. Basically, there's so many
Okay,
differences.
I love that stuff. That's really cool because I can see that completely and I get it. And I think this is like the main argument of the end, right? Is like, is it this or is it not? Because I can see your point of view completely. The way I see it is that when, like, say, where you said that, like, why would these Southern Lords vote for Bran? And I agree. They don't know who he is. They don't know, but they know Ned, right? They know the honor of Ned Stark. And I think that's more than anything the deal here. They also, and it depends on which family it is, but some do. And I think that's the key to the Manderleys moving, the Blackwoods moving. It doesn't matter that it's Ned. It matters that it's a Stark. And I don't think we've seen enough of this stuff yet to see what Bloodraven really did before Bran got there, right? Like, what if Bloodraven did try to kill someone or stop succession or stop, like, Summerhall or enable Summerhall to happen by saying, yeah, do it. Make the dragon eggs, light them afire or something like that. And he fucked up, excuse my French, badly, because that's like interfering in free will, right? So if you can't take people's free will. That's my whole argument against that, is that if Bran were to get involved, he would be taking people's free will and he would be judging and he would be taking the final judgment and saying, well, Littlefinger, you got to go. And, like, I hear you, I do. But like, he would be interfering in the world of men, and he's no longer a man, he's a god. Does God come down and snatch people and hit us with lightning? No. So does Bran come down and put the hand of God onto Peter Baelish? No, he doesn't. Because that's up to Arya, Sansa, to the north, to Littlefinger, to Cat, to Ned, to everyone. So the evidence versus altering the past, would you punish so-and-so or let it be? I think a god has to let it be, right? I mean, I see it that way. That's omnipresence. That's omnipotence in an empathic way, as a green seer mixed with a god, right? So that's how I see it. Like, if Bran isn't able to swing the sword, it's because he's not ever going to swing the sword. Somebody else will always be a king, a prince in his place. So it's not Bran. It's the god Bran has become who's sitting the throne, right? So in a sense, you're right. There will have to be a henchman or someone like that. Or maybe there will be no king's justice. There will be no henchman. There will be wardens of the south and the north and different places to do that, to carry out man's justice. But as a god, I think that's kind of the point of Bran being. And that ties kind of back into the Accursed King series. I have to say this really quickly, is that George always says he based this off the 100 Years' War and the War of the Roses. The Accursed King series is where he says it's the original Game of Thrones. And it's written by a man named Maurice Doron, who was French, and he wrote these books about the War of the Roses. And I've listened to a couple of them, actually 3 of them, and it begins with 2 best friends, one a king, one is the head of the head knight of the Knights Templar. And the king and he grew up together like Ned and Robert did. And it comes to a point where the king wants to go against the Knights Templar and kind of blame things on them that the church and the king, the crown, has done together. And then the head of the Knights Templar, whose name's Jacques de Molay, says, I'm not carrying out this wish for you. I will stay a knight of God, and I will stay in my place. And so the king says, I'm going to burn you alive. And he says, fine. So he does burn his best friend, who's the first knight of the Knights Templar. And as he's burning him, he says, I curse his Jacques de Molay, the head of the Knights Templar, says, I curse you, I curse you, I curse you for 13 generations. So if you look at Robert Baratheon and Ned, that's kind of what happened. And in Ned saying Baelor, and in Robert kind of going through the actions that he goes through, there's so many. Now I see why George says that he gave everyone the ending in the first book, because Robert goes through each Stark child and touches them in a certain way the first time he meets them when he gets to Winterfell. And that's a theory that's been out there for a while, but now I just came back around to it and saw it again and went, oh my God, this all happened. The way Robert, he says to Arya, what's your name? He says to Bran, show me your muscles. He shakes Rob's hand. The ones he touches, he puts his hand on, he says to Sansa, oh, you're pretty, and passes her by, right? So, and he touches Rickon, I think, on the shoulder. So the ones he touches dies, but the ones he doesn't touch become what he asked them.
Say that again. Hold on. Say that again, that last part.
The ones he doesn't touch becomes what he asks them, like Arya, what's your name? No one, right? Or I'm Arya Stark of Winterfell. Then he says to Bran, show me your muscles. And he's like, and he puts up his little arm and he's like, oh, you're going to be a great knight someday or something. But all Bran's got is his upper strength, his upper body strength, right? So it's really weird. I came across that theory long ago and I'd forgotten about it. And I saw it again and went, oh my God, now this kind of makes a lot of sense. Back then it was really bizarre. And I don't know whose theory it is, but it's kind of cool if you go back and look at it, how he greets every Stark child. He passes Sansa right up. Oh, you're beautiful. And I don't think he talks to Jon at all. So it's interesting. The whole thing of the body snatchers too at the same time is that's how I see Bloodraven. He is a body snatcher. He takes over bodies. And I think I've actually been studying him for so long now that I think I've found the houses he takes the bodies from. One being House Blackwood, one being Osprey and all these Standfast, Cold Mode, all these houses that are extinct that had to do with more like the Dunk and Egg novels. So I see him taking over bodies, and Bloodraven even has a line where he says a green seer can take over anything, even fish. Like when Dunk drowns in that little tiny puddle of water at I think it's the Ashford tourney, and he's like, I can't believe I'm drowning in a pond, like a little pond of water. And it's literally just like a thing of mud water. And he sees a little white fish swim by, and it's got red eyes, and it's like, it's Bloodraven. It's an albino fish with red eyes. And he's like, hey. It's like when Bran's falling and the Raven's like, got any corn? And he gets these golden kernels of corn out of his pocket, right? This is always Bloodraven, and he pops up everywhere. And I have a theory that he's the Kettleblacks too. I really do. The pot calling the kettle black is just nothing but ravens and crows and Bloodraven. I mean, I don't know. I'm still on this, but it's one of these things that I see Bloodraven everywhere. I just see him everywhere. And I think that this is one of these things where, like, Bran is strong in the present tense, but not in the past, in a way that he's committing abominations, but he's never learned that way because Bloodraven never taught him that way, right? He's never heard Hagon's way. I don't think. But, you can disagree with me all you want. I'll let somebody else go because I've been talking forever.
Okay, I was going back to the notes that I did have on the when you talk about ravens and all, and they appear in the Old Testaments in the reference to the destruction of Edom. And it's the smoldering remains of wrathful destruction. Nothing was permitted to pass through except ravens, and that's from Listver's Listbers. Beyond acting like harbingers of death, adorning spooky Halloween costumes, they're very intelligent, adaptable, and they're truly fascinating creatures. They're in the court of the family, and they hold prestigious titles, and they're considered the smartest. They have that special affinity with the wolves, and they're often seen as omens. And I also found out they like to get stoned, believe it or not. And they partake in something called anting. This is from that same one in lispers.com. And it says this involves smashing ants and rubbing them all over the raven's body. Ants produce formic acid when smashed, which is absorbed into the raven's skin and apparently feels incredibly good to them. And they appear to be in hog heaven when they're doing that. They're overjoyed. They're emphatic. They're pirates. So there you go. There is a reference to Euron right there being a pirate. So Blood Raven being the three-eyed raven very possibly did have some connection with Euron. And the one I liked about ravens was that they protect the Tower of London. And Geoffrey Mothmouth wrote about King Bran, Hen of Brynnick. Bran, which means raven in Welsh, requested that his head be buried at the tower to act as a talisman against invasion. Ravens have been there ever since, and Charles II ordered that six ravens must be kept at the tower constantly. They're still there. I think they clip their tails and all. They're tricksters in Native America. And that's the thing that got me about them being a trickster, is that the way this is turning out, if it comes out the way the show turned it out, maybe they are just being tricksters. They like you say, maybe that's the Loki parallel there. And they recognize and remember faces, and I can attest to that. At the Ice and Fire convention, we have a raven that comes named Rocky, and they're just great people. This raven, I do believe this raven actually remembers me, because he just let me pet him under his chin and played with me for a long time. So ravens are a paradox in a lot of things. That's about it.
Oh, I so love that you brought that up, Nan, because I think it's fascinating that the crow or the ravens are at the Tower of London because of Bran the Blessed, King Bran. He was a Niflheim.
Mhm.
He was a giant, is what they say. And so, I don't know if this means like he's sort of like George's version of the first men, That kind of seems like the Niflheim to me. And that there's also go ahead.
There is a nymph, and let me go on a little bit, and this might be some of what you were talking about. The Roman legend says that ravens were once as white as swans, but one day the raven told Apollo that Coronis, a Thessalian nymph, whom he passionately loved, was faithless. God shot the nymph with his dart, but hating the messenger, turned him black as coal. And then the prophet foretells that death, but can also be helpful in finding lost property. He's a messenger god to the sun god Apollo, and is attributed to an attribute of Athena, Kronos, and Asclepius. You probably know how to pronounce that. It's a symbol of fertility, as such as was invoked at weddings. In Zoroastrianism, the raven is a pure bird, as it removes pollution, and in Mithraism, it represents the first grade of initiation. Chinese myths has a three-legged raven in the sun, predicting its rising, noontide, and setting. In Hinduism, Brahma appears as a raven in one incarnation. The raven crow goddess, the blessed raven, is important in Celtic lore and has a threefold function as war, fertility, and prophecy. Um, the raven
Yes.
of battle, the goddess Bad Badba, represents war and bloodshed and is an ill omen. Morrigan, Bran, and Lugh are associated with the raven, and the last had two magic ravens similar to those of Odin, Hugin and Munin.
Thought memory.
Armenians,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, that's Armenians just have them as tricksters and heroes and shapeshifters. So there you go into the shapeshifting.
Yeah.
And he's not just a trickster, but also a creator, and appears as Raven Man, the big grandfather. Now that's something there, the big grandfather. He's one of the creatures which recreated the land after the flood and stole the sun, and he's a great messenger of the Great Spirit. And that is from treesforlife.org, Forest, Mythology, Folklore, Raven.
Oh, I love
Okay, I'm
that.
done.
That's beautiful because that is a lot of what I was going to go into, but it's even more of all the myths. And I love this because there's a myth of Bran everywhere in England and Ireland, and I even think other places, because now we're learning that people came from Egypt to Ireland and back again. And then some of them went even into Israel and other places. So the Bran is the blessed raven, which is so cool. And I think it's Bacchus that you were talking about, the god of wine and pleasure, and that is present at weddings and stuff like that. Is that what you were saying? Um anyway, the part about Apollo I love, because Apollo is the equivalent of Lu, the sun god of Celtic mythology, who is called his entire name is Lu of the long arm or the long claw, which just like jumps out right there. It's John. John is a sun god. He is Mithras. He's Jesus in a lot of ways. But he's more like a Mithras, because the Persian Mithras was a warrior god. So that's more like John to me. And being the son of Rhaegar, who was also like Uther Pendragon of Arthur mythology, and the god, the son of the son of the sun, the god of the sun. So Lu of the Long Arm was Bran's brother, and Bronwyn was his sister. So the giant Bran the Blessed guards the White Tower, which is the Tower of London. Henry VIII is also called the White King and the Winter King, who I think has something to do with Aegon IV, maybe a little bit. Henry VIII, I don't think has much to do with Robert Baratheon, like it seems. I think he's more like Aegon IV with the great bastards, one of which is Bloodraven. But the big grandfather is a big one, because they call Jojen the little grandfather, right? Or the grandfather. So Fenrir in Norse mythology is the Fenrir, the the wolf who runs along the horizon and eats the sun. So there's something about Fenrir, and actually Jojen calls Bran the winged wolf, and that's what Fenrir is, the winged wolf. And as saying he's the grandfather, the big grandfather, is kind of like saying he's Odin, or he's, and sometimes George flips things, so it could be Loki, but it's the grandfather, the all-father is always Odin, or the Dagda, who is the father of Lu and Bob and Bran. So, and the Morrigan. So it seems like George has mixed all these mythologies together, and Athena, the warrior goddess, is also has a little bit to do with Hecate, the goddess of magic and of shape-shifting. The Morgans shapeshifter into ravens, and that was his sister also. So it's really cool that you brought that up, because whenever we never saw what I said before, like what Bloodraven did before Bran got there, that he learned from. Obviously, everything probably that he told Bran not to do was what he had done before, and learned that that was not what you do, because you affect things in a bad way. Or even if it's in a good way, later on it might turn out that somebody doesn't live that you wanted to, or somebody that you needed doesn't end up living because of what you did. They're not even born, or they don't have the place that they did. So it's one of these things that I think is so interesting, because Apollo was a sun god. I think the paste is really important with Bran, that Bloodraven immediately, and the children immediately give Bran the weirwood paste after Jojen dies. So it's like a green seer, kind of like not a green seer, but someone who can see, whose third eye has been opened, being given the paste, but also being given a sacrifice, because I think we know by now that Jojen was in that weirwood paste, because Bran saw things in there that disgusted him that looked like blood and veins and stuff like that. So it was probably Jojen that he was eating. So at that point, he became a god, but a god who's committing what Hagen calls abominations, and which is what bastards are also called, abominations, which is what Jon would be. And I really don't think in the books that Jon and that Rhaegar and Lyanna are going to have married and had some septon that didn't live at the time. There was no high septon then, so there's no way that a high septon could have married them and annulled Rhaegar's marriage, because he didn't exist. He was dead. So, and I don't see a high septon keeping this in his diary. So I think Jon will be a bastard. It's just, like Aegon the Fourth is the perfect example, because he's not only Bloodraven and Bittersteel and Shiera Seastar's father, and Daemon Targaryen and Daemon Blackfyre and Daemon Targaryen, but he's also, this started the Blackfyre line, it started the wars, it started Bittersteel and Bloodraven being at each other's throats, and then Daemon Blackfyre starting the Blackfyre line. So it splits them off. But like they say, a dragon is a dragon, red or black. So my whole thing is that I think Bloodraven, from the Duncan Egg novels on, has been taking bodies. He's been taking animals. Cows are a major thing for shamans and shapeshifters have around them. And at the Ashford tourney, I think it was, when Bloodraven shows up with his troops and the troops of the Red Widow, he sets up his pavilion, and it's pink, because that's his color of how he flips the Targaryen sigil to a white dragon on a black field, or a black field, a black dragon on a white field, something like that, with red eyes. So he's got cows all around his little pavilion tent. And it's like, what? Why are there cows? So I looked it up, and it's that cows are the easiest to shapeshift into and practice because they're not so smart, right? Birds are the hardest. Like Hagen also says, cats and birds are the hardest. They're awful. Dogs will go along with you. Wolves will, because they're man's friend. And that's why he's six skins, because he's been able to skin change a snow bear, a snow cat, wolves, and then he bounces back from Orel's eagle into his lover, Thistle, who scratches her face off when he's inside of her, which I think is exactly what happened with Catelyn when Robb died. So here's another Stark saying, first he says Grey Wind when Robb dies. He says Grey Wind's killed. He can't warg into Grey Wind. Then he says mother. He tries to warg into Catelyn without even knowing it. I think he just does it by nature of being a warg, skin changer. So he bounces into Catelyn. She starts laughing and scratching at her face. And that's how they find her, face down in the stream with her face scratched and her eyes scratched out. And that's when Walder Frey says, she's gone insane. She's mad. Kill her. And she's got Jingle Bell. Aegon is his name, but Jingle Bell by the neck. And she cuts his throat. And they kill her and throw her in the stream. So it's almost like it's all the same thing. Just the cyclical world again going on. So if you look at, like, if you make Bran, if you give him the paste, he takes the sacrifice, he becomes the weirwood, he becomes the seer. And he can't stop things. That's Bloodraven's main warning, right? Is to, if you go back, the past is written, the ink is dry. You can't go back and change things. I think he's saying that to get Bran not to even try. Because we see that he stops Ned on his way up to the Tower of Joy saying, Father, and Ned stops and turns around. Jon even hears him. And he's like, is that he thinks that's Bran's voice. And the heart tree in the Godswood starts to look like Ned when Ned dies. Later on, the tree's crying. So it might be Bran. So I just think all this is so cool because it's Bran strong, like you said, Steph, in the past, but also in the present. He's basically become Bloodraven. I mean, that's the only teacher. Like Varamir Sixskins had his teacher in Hagon. Bran had his teacher in Bloodraven. That's all he knows. Whether he's a green seer or not, he's been given this ability by the weirwood paste and by being taught by Bloodraven. So I don't even know if it has anything to do with green seers, but he does keep the memory because he can see things. He saw Daeron Targaryen's nephew's wheelchair, right?
When you talk about Bloodraven and everything, that brings me to and we were talking about what happened with Hodor. Basically, what Bran did, he warged from within a warg, and Bloodraven told him to do it because he told him, said, listen to your friend. We need Hodor. So that's a pretty powerful thing to do, is to do a warg within a warg, to see and warg at the same time, to be connected and to warg within that warg. And also when it comes to the werewoods itself, like I said before, anytime you get the were in front of it, whether it's like werewolf, you get werewood. It's basically a blood drinker. The tree is a blood drinker. And what basically happened, in my view, to Bran is all a process of blood magic that was used on him by Bloodraven and the children of the forest. And in that process, he warged within a warg and made Hodor. And they, knowing that he would be a crippled green Bloodraven, evidently set that up. Because I've never, that's the only time we've heard of that. So yeah, it was all black magic. And also, Leaf said that eventually they would be gone,
Hold on,
and that the wolves would.
I'm gonna interrupt you
Go
for a
ahead.
second. What do you mean
Okay.
Hodor and Bran have like a blood link? I'm confused with that.
What I'm saying is that Bloodraven had Bran within a warg in the tree, and Bloodraven told him to listen to his friend. So basically, he did a warg within a warg. Does that make sense? While he was in the tree, he warged. If he had warged Hodor and not been tied to that network to the tree, then Hodor would have been his normal, it wouldn't have happened. He would have, you know what I'm saying? The warging within the warg that Bloodraven told him to do is what caused Hodor to be Hodor, basically. But Leaf said the wolves are going to be gone, but she didn't say anything about the ravens. So now he's a raven. So,
True.
So that was all. Oh, and one more point on the free will. I think as far as him being a god, I don't know that he is a god. I think he's what the first men said, that he was it's just a part of their, I think, culture, because he can influence, but he can't change. And I think that there's still free will there. Just like when he told John, it's your choice, There has to be free will, no matter what, I would think. I mean, suggestions, maneuvers, talking raven, corn, king, Jon Snow, whatever. Talking about the crow at the Castle Black. But either way, that's my point.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm through.
Okay, I'll jump in because I've been. Yeah, you guys can take a refresher for a little while. Okay, where were we? I'm not gonna touch on any of the mythology stuff because like everyone else but me, like they're masters and I'm a newbie. I'm not gonna touch it. It's just I'm not here nor there. Okay, I'm a student. Okay, I'm never gonna pass the master. I'm just gonna graduate with a diploma and that be that. Okay. Okay, so Bran is a Stark. Starks carry a name. Bran is already taking it. See, okay, I think this goes back way back to Ashley's point. I have a problem with that Starks carry a name because let's say hypothetically if the Danes are at this Senate thing and they're like, who killed Arthur Dane? Tell me how he died. Tell me truthfully how he died and how Ned brought the sword to us. Exactly, verbatim. They're gonna test him on that. Like I just don't. I don't feel like Bran is gonna be the person to be like, yeah, I did it. Like I feel like Jon Snow has done enough in that time lapse, right? Of his night times at the Night's Watch, then his battle of I guess the battle of whatever. I guess he's got to do something. Maybe the Battle of the Vale to get Sansa or whatever. That's how I feel it's gonna go. Jon is gonna rescue Sansa, and they're gonna have oh, what's that? I forget what it is now. Where Arya goes. There's like a ceremony that takes place there, and I mentioned it in another video. might want to look it up. It's on AU Pack Mule's channel, or John's channel now. But yeah, that's how I feel like John's gonna go. It's not gonna be the Battle of the Bastards. It's gonna be the battle to get Sansa and then bring Sansa back home. But I feel like they're gonna test him in some magnitude, Bran, right? Like this thing is why Bran, right? Like you gotta test your king out. Like you test your leaders out, or you test to make sure they're not stupid and stuttering and talking about water bottles and them being cardboard and crap, right? Like, just make some coherent sense. Yeah, that's a jab at Trudeau, by the way. But like, to me, to Bran already feels like it's fate. Like, there's no point of it, him influencing it, because he already knows he's got it. Right. And that kind of goes to what I was saying, like, way earlier in the stream, where green sight, right? Like, there's the warg, which is the beginning stage, then there's skin changing, then there's green seer, and then there's green sight, which is separate, right? It's almost like everyone has that in some magnitude, right? Or some degree, right? So it's almost like Bran, because of his green sight, he already knows how he's going to die. And if he influences those events to be like, I did nothing to deserve this in any sort of way, he's going to die. He's going to get stabbed, or he's going to get 1,000 cuts all at once because you screwed up that badly. You could have told us how all this was going to go down. We could have saved tens of thousands of lives, and you did absolutely nothing. Right. And that's where I kind of agree with Melisandre's point of view, where, and I hope George R. R. Martin goes more into that in The Winds of Winter and Dreamless Ring and stuff like that, where he focuses on Melisandre and her doubting her prophetic interpretations, right? Like, kind of like Arya on the horse, but we all know it was Alice Karstark, right? So I kind of hope it's like that, where they give Bran the benefit of the doubt. But I feel like if you know that the sea is going to come over in the middle of Winterfell, like, you should already know, being so wise, so that being a schizo, you should know this stuff, right? And I just believe it's a cop-out. And Ashley said that, like, gods can't interfere, right? They can't do anything, but that's what a king's supposed to do. He's supposed to interfere. He's supposed to, like, a leader's supposed to interfere with the present enough to influence the future for it to be beneficial to those people that are in that present, right? So it, like, to me, it just, like, Bran doesn't make sense in that scope. And then
that's why books will bring this out, because we just got so much left out of it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's why that theory is kind of helping me somewhat, like, be able to, like, tangibly link what's going on, because it's not Bran, it's actually Jon that's doing these things. Where he's not saying, I'm a green seer, come after me, right? He's saying, I'm this and I can't do shit, but I can do this, and then get influenced by that, right? Like, that's what I'm thinking. Ashley brought up, like, the Templars, right? And, like, all I know of the Templars, right, because I'm obviously a gamer, because my sister works for a gaming company, is Assassin's Creed and upholding justice against yourself. It's self-sacrifice, right? That's what I wrote here, and it just doesn't make sense in the scope. Again, Bran's not self-sacrificing himself for the betterment of his people, right? He's holding stuff back because he knows that's how he's gonna die. That's how I feel. That's how I know there's something wrong, right? That's why he's not present. Just like how Howland Reed's not present, because he knows he would die in all those events. He knows, like, it's like Jojen, but Jojen knew that was the way he was supposed to die. Bran's symbolism for Cat. Again, you're saying that Cat's looking for justice for the dead, and Bran's not. That's it. They're completely detached. Like that's why. Like I think at the beginning of the stream, you were talking about how Cat looked over him and did all this stuff for him. Where Cat in the books, right? She's still alive. She's still seeking justice for the Freys, right? She wants them dead, which Arya does in the show. But like to Cat, like maybe that is Cat. Like we don't know, right? So like I feel like if Bran knew that, he would aid Cat in that, but he doesn't, right? Like you like send a raven. Like you can warg into these things and send a letter and do whatever. You're not so stupid that you can't write a letter. Like you got to send these things out. Blackfire Rebellion, Dragon Black or Red. John, again, see, this is where like that thing where it's tangible for me, right? John is black and red, right? It wouldn't affect that story where mysteriously this unknown character comes in and it's like, I want the throne, right? Like Bran, like who are you? Like to anybody, you're nobody. And how Cat died, Ash, that was ugly. That was so disgusting how you brought that up. How like Rob went Grey Wind and then his mother, and then that was ugly. Like I wrote ugly. That's what I got here.
It was horrifying.
Just gross, right? Just nasty. I hope people go back.
It was the same thing Gardner Sixskins did to Thistle, and she was freaking out. Remember, it was disgusting. It was. It's like it makes you want to retch.
Oh, okay. So what do I have here? Again, this isn't a point for Ash. We have seen Bran in the trees in the Theon Winter chapter. He has like the mustache on. Right? He starts getting like these little mustaches, right? In the Winterfell Godswood. I do find it interesting that the memory of others, right? You're saying that once he enters the Wernet, you like in his schizo phrase that there's other memories competing for dominance, right? It's not like they have this symbiotic relationship where they all. It's I forget how George, a hive mind. That's how George explains it in his other book. Where everyone works in tangent with one another, right? It's not like that. It's schizo. It's these people, these personalities and everything working for dominance over each other. And he's like, no, don't do this. No, yes, do this, right? Say this. No, don't say this, right? Like it's confusing him, right? And that's why he seems so distant, right? I like that. That was definitely interesting. Like these competing personalities. I didn't think about it in the sense of memory. Yeah, I like that. I agree with Cynthia about blood magic. I disagree with Hodor. It was evidence that Bran, like Varamir, is not strong enough to take on these other characters, right? Like, I understand that you think he was warging into another, like he was skin changing into the tree and then skin changing into Hodor, and that's why Hodor was screwed up. But just like Varamir tried to skin change into the tree. He couldn't, but he skin changed into Thistle and he wasn't able to. Right? But to say that Bran's not able to skin change into another human being without the Wernet, right? Like he's been proven to be able to do that within Hodor. We chalked it up.
No, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. Well, I guess I said he didn't go back in time. But I guess time is nothing to a green seer. It's a river. So, yeah, I agree with you there. That he affected Hodor's mind by seeing, when he went back with Bloodraven, seeing what he'd done in the show anyway.
Yeah.
You know, but in the beginning, it was that the green seer, whoever it was, went back in time and affected that part.
So you think it was another green seer that did that? Like it was Brynden Rivers who screwed up, because that's the way I originally took it. That when Brynden
Yeah.
Rivers died, he jumped into Hodor as his second life, and then he just kept repeating, "Hold the door, hold the door, hold the door," and then it became Hodor.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, I
Oh,
mean, I
like
think I know from at least my own experience of, I grew up, I'll just say it, I grew up in a haunted house. I grew up in a house that my father built in the middle of nowhere in a canyon. And I don't know, what went on in this canyon, but I do know that the Donner Party went through that canyon. So I don't know what in the hell went on in this house, but my sister and I both named a spirit who would slam doors when we would cry and when we were sad. And it was a trip, and it's affected me for the rest of my life, and I've been able to feel things passing through. My ears start to ring. I get weird migraine kind of headaches, but they go away, not like your stuff. They just come like color. I call them colors, just like storms of color. And but they're gone. But it's excruciating pain. So it's this weird thing where I feel like that's kind of the veil dropping, and I'm able to, for some reason, maybe because I grew up that way and nobody ever said it was bad, that I didn't know. Like, nobody said, well, girls don't see things that aren't there. You know what I mean? Nobody said that to me. They just went, well, if you see it, you see it, because my dad and my mom are really cool. But I don't know, maybe it's different for people because every child sees things. Like, my nephew used to point at the corner of the wall and laugh when he was a little baby, and like he was playing with something that we couldn't see. But it was right after my dad passed. So I always wonder if maybe he was seeing him. So I think the veil drops. And I know that the pagans believed that the veil itself was the veil between the living and the dead, and that on October 31st it dropped. The veil was thinned. Or you could call it being able to go into the liminal world, where when you astral project, you can go into that world. You can see the dead. Probably shouldn't, but you can. But that's, to me, why they call the wall the end of the world, because it's the veil between the living and the dead. And so Bran, when he goes beyond that wall, Bloodraven's not dead and neither's Bran. But Bloodraven's called the last green seer. Bran's not a green seer. He's just not. So to me, it means that Bloodraven is teaching him how to affect things, but not to change the flow of the river because the ink is dry. You know what I'm saying? Like, Bran can see ghosts, maybe.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
More than
I'll give a reference. It's kind of like the movie Insidious, where like the kid is alive, but he's in an altered state where he's able to see the ghosts.
Right.
I get what you're saying. It's kind of like Jamie's fever dream, where he's able to see the ghosts of all those those in his past. Yeah, okay, I get what you're saying. Yeah,
exactly. Because he slept on a weirwood stump. And I think that's why this always comes up, like the three sisters at Highgarden, the weirwoods, and the ring of 9 weirwoods at White Walls, or not White Walls, White Tree, and the ring at Old Stones too. Those kind of things are like, those are powerful. And also, just really quickly, there's another place in Cornwall in England that's called Caer Bran, and it has an E on the end of Bran, so it's sort of Brne, but it's pronounced Bran. And it's an old ring fort that is 3 ring forts in a row in one circle. They're cairns, actually. And then there's one big monolith that has an inscription on it to Rialto Bran, which is the Latin for son of ravens. And this stands today, and ravens fly around this old Iron Age hill fort all the time, and they don't know why. Just like you were saying this, Cynthia, that Nan, the one that in the Tower of London, that the ravens fly around the Tower of London, where Bran's head was. So it's one of these weird things that wherever Bran is, you know, even in George's books, wherever Bran is, you know, it doesn't affect things, but it does because his spirit's there, like when Ned heard him. So he comes through the veil at times, and that to me is the door that Hodor's holding, like all this time. It's not that Hodor's just been waiting for the whites to come in the cave. It's that Hodor's been holding that door the whole time. He's been holding Bran back from this other world that he could have fallen into at any time. He's holding himself back from this world that he could have fallen into at any time. And he did, because now he's weakened, but he was already weakened as a sort of not all there stable boy, you know? So that's kind of sadly, and I think this is the bittersweet part of it, is that that's sadly the vessel that you can take, right? The one that's not all there, and the one that might be, you know, because Hodor was kind of they called him the half-wit stable boy, right? So it's kind of like it's easier, just like I said with the cows, with Bloodraven, he always travels with cows because it's easy to skin change cows. It's easy to shapeshift cows. That's a shamanistic thing. So that's how I see it. It's more of like Hodor was holding the door the whole time. He was holding the door so powerfully that he couldn't do anything else. And that's why Bran was able to take him over again and again and again. And it's the saddest thing in the world. And I think Green's here is a sad, you know, the world is a sad thing because men are evil in a lot of ways. They're great too. They're like Leaf said, she walked along among men for 200 years, and what she saw was that men are good. And I think Bran sees the same thing, and Bloodraven sees the same thing, but they see that there has to be someone else leading them, right? Someone good to the core leading them, but someone who's willing to do things that maybe aren't so good to the outside eye, but no one else can really see that. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that comes from my strange past and the whole concept of holding the door. There's a concept of a red door in like spiritualism where the spirits of the dead are on the other side of the red door. And I think that might be Dany's red door too, is the red door to her ancestors, or the Amethyst Empress, or whoever. Because it kind of just happened again. The Bloodstone Emperor just slayed the Amethyst Empress with Jon and Daenerys, right? Sorry, yeah. Correct me, Steph.
Yeah, like the Red Keep. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Okay, so
yeah.
I'm gonna go. Okay, so it's definitely spooky what you said about Cornwall and Bran with an E. Like that's very true. Again, like I'm just like soaking in everything as a student. But like
it's wild. When I read that, I was like, oh, I want to go see this place so bad.
Right? Like it's just like I can't even tap into that, like realistically. Like it's just not in me to tap into that. Like I kind of want to be ignorant, like in that situation. Like I just want to be able to like look in awe at all like historical like events and fascination, right? Like I rather argue the semantics now than do it later, right? Where like in the past, do whatever the hell you want, right? Like history is won by
I love it.
Like
I love it because this is why I love you so much. Like this, because you're so honest that you get the real deal, right? Because you just let it out, and I let it out, so we have these things go on, and since Nan lets it out, so we have these things go on. And the deal is, what the Dalai Lama says about people is that, like, there's somebody who's meant to just sit and watch. There are people who are meant to do great things and big things and be stars or be actors or be, world leaders or anything that's influential to
Boy,
other
that ain't
people.
us.
And there's some who are just meant to kind of be and work the land, or there's all kinds of people, and we have to find a way to live on one earth together. Go ahead, Nan. Sorry.
I was talking muted. That sure wasn't us. We have to work and live from paycheck to paycheck around here. There was one point I wanted
Well, that's true.
that um, that you were making about the veil of life, and it's the silver cord part. And I don't know if that's biblical or I've read it. I think it's biblical, but somewhere along the way, I have heard the brainstem referenced as the silver cord. If the brainstem is ever separated, then that's death right there. So, I just thought I'd throw that in there. That's all.
Yeah, that's mostly with a lot of like zombie literatures, right? Like it's the brainstem, right? Like if it's severed,
Yeah.
that's it, done.
Yeah. My husband loves the zombie movies, and we just watched one yesterday that's really good. So that's, yeah. And I love that you just brought that up, Cynthia, man, because that's so cool. It's the concept of, and I'm sure you know this, knowing the Bible as you do, the land of milk and honey, and the spinal cord being the ladder to the ladder of the planets. And because what happens when the moon is full in your sign, like I'm an Aquarius, so if the moon was full in my sign, that's when my third eye opens. And we all have this. So your third eye opens on that day. And this is it, it's not crap. It's true. And I think this is what the Bible is about in this way, is that when and it doesn't say, I don't know if it says anything about the moon being in your sign, but it's when the sacred oil, which is DMT, which is amber, which is kind of like the shade of the evening, or the weirwood paste, there's a red and a white, right? That come from your third eye and go down, that come from your pituitary and your pineal gland. And
Explain
they go
that
down
again.
your spinal.
Everything.
There's
Sorry.
one that comes out of, okay, so
This
there's
is
one oil. Yes, it is.
This shamanism. Yeah.
It is. I think, but the land of milk and honey is in the Bible, and I think this is what it's referring to. So your pituitary gland and your pineal gland is your third eye. So when the moon is in your sign, just as you as a person, the pituitary and the pineal let out two different kinds of oils, and they come together and make, one's an amber and one's kind of a white, and they go down your spinal cord and back up to your sacral chakra, excuse me. So that's where the 33 degrees of a Freemason comes from, is the 33 vertebrae of your spine that this oil goes down and comes back up to. And your sacral chakra ends in your kind of hip area. So it goes through all of your chakras, all 7 chakras. And then it comes back up, but it doesn't go all the way back up. And when it opens, you can feel it. And if you're in tune enough, which a lot of us are still, some of us aren't, some of us don't care, some of us do, like me, and we watch the moon and we watch the stars and we watch things like this, and we try to feel it, and we meditate and we feel it. So and there's supposed to be a lot of things that close our third eye right now, like mercury and lead and things in the water, chlorine and such. So, and fluoride. So there are a lot of things that can close the third eye. So I think this is what the weirwood paste and the shade of the evening represent, are the two different pituitary gland and the pineal gland releasing. Like the shade of the evening is like kind of what the pituitary releases. The pineal releases more of a DMT, amber sort of thing. And fossils are fossilized in amber. Amber was like gold in the ancient Egyptian days and the days of the Sumerians, if I'm correct. So amber is kind of like, and amber's brought up quite a few times. Like amber's the color of the skin changer's eyes and of the wolf, some of the wolf's eyes. I think it's summer. No, it's summer. One of them has yellow eyes. It's Nymeria, and one other. But the point is that it's the traveling down your spinal cord that is the same as the ladder of the planets, right? As above, so below. It's the alchemical process. Does it make any sense what I'm saying?
Kinda, but only because I did that research before on one of our things about the migration of man and how the shamans and shamanism and the DMT, and I think what you're saying is basically the body is producing DMT at certain points when the moon is full in your sign.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
So we all get a shot of DMT every month on the time that our moon is full in our sign.
Exactly. Yeah, and so we can see beyond our own world and see into maybe beyond the veil.
As to the stones, it's long been thought that there are certain stones in some of these ritualistic things, that there are stones with healing properties. Even silver is considered to this day as an antiseptic in some things. You have silverdine, you have liquid silver that people actually take and stuff like that. I'm not recommending anything,
silver,
but these things have colloidal silver. These things have been around for a long time, and so I kind of.
Yeah, it's one of these things like, acupuncturists use it. They in order to balance your chi, which is your life force, you have to balance all 7 chakras. So it's our bodies in symbiosis or in tandem, in harmony with the planets, with the rest of the earth, right? With the 4 earth, water, air, and fire, with, like the ancient Celts used to say that, right, like cupping too. Cupping I do all the time, and I have big welts on my back all the time. I just got in a car accident, so I've been getting cupping done a lot, which is one of the medieval techniques that they used to use that is really intense. But this is something football players use today, and it's a lot of people use it now. But it was looked at as a kind of a horrifying technique to use. But now it's like, it's really not painful at all. All they do is put the cup on your back, and they put a little vacuum kind of suction cup thing onto it, and they suck your skin up, but it also sucks up your tendons and your blood vessels and everything into the cup. And then they heat you with a sun lamp kind of thing. And then I'm sure it works for migraines. It works for everything. It works for menopause. It works for like drug addiction. It works for muscle pain. It works for back pain. And there's nothing better than it, really. But when I get it done, like I hurt my shoulder in my last car accident. So he did cups all down my back and all over my shoulders. And the shoulder that I hurt was purple. That where that cup was purple for 2 weeks, and the rest of them weren't. They were varying degrees of color, so you could tell where the toxins are being sucked out of your body. So it's kind of like that. It's like it's also like what Melisandre did to Stannis, right? Like she's a red god, she's a priestess of the red god, a high priestess. So she knows how to do these healing property kind of magical things, but she also knows how to read the flames. So if it weren't her with her training as Melanie Lot 7, it would, she can actually, that's why I can see her bringing somebody back to life, but with her own will, not by R'hllor, with her own will, which she thinks is through R'hllor, but she's just channeling the power of the universe, right? That's how I see it, because it's all connected. And that's why the alchemists used to say, as above, so below, and they still do. Like what goes on above happens in our bodies. Yeah, it's like, I mean, this is like, this has been my life. I study these things. Sorry,
I'm glad
but
you know about it because I don't.
well,
I'm sorry, I'm a dummy.
What's interesting about it is you probably know, I mean, I'm sure you know about the land of milk and honey, right?
Well, yeah, that's when where the Moses took the children of Eden. That was the promised land of milk and honey. And
Right.
Moses saw it over. He didn't get to go there, but he got to see the promised land, land of milk and honey.
Right.
On the hill.
So he saw it. He saw it.
He didn't get
I'll add to that.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Cynthia. I keep cutting you off. I feel like
go ahead.
No, that's
go ahead.
Okay.
That's where we needed to get. That's perfect.
Yeah, Cynthia's right. It's basically like it's somewhere near Jerusalem, right? And he sees it, and he's like, "Oh my God!" Right? But also in the books, in a Jamie chapter, it refers to the land of milk and honey between the Brackens and the Blackwoods and the God's Eye. It's like a triangle, right? And that's where it is. Right, and I always thought that that's where the battle was going to go down. Like the last battle down with the others, right? Because that's what they were going to fight for, the land of milk and honey. Like it was beyond the Trident, so you could see Dany fighting there, and then they were going to travel and continue down to the land of milk and honey. That's how it always went in my head. I wrote that down in my books, like paragraphs and paragraphs on it. Yeah, but it was between those three areas. Like it was like this. Like it was crazy. Summer has yellow eyes, and that goes into the dragon glass of ice and fire in the song, obviously, at the end.
Yeah, the land of milk and honey, Moses didn't get to go, but Joshua did. He was one of the two, him and Caleb were one of the two spies that Moses sent into the land. And the other spies came back and said, there's giants there. There's fierce people. We can never take them. And Joshua and Caleb were one of the only two to say, yes, we can. So they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. And then when they came back, those were the only two of them that lived to actually live in the land. Okay, I'm through. I'll quit preaching.
Preach.
Well, that's the beauty of it all, right?
It ties life in a way. I mean, you got to have a lot of wisdom in something that ancient and old and wise. So anyway, but yeah, that was the land of milk and honey. There was a battle.
Thank you for that, Cynthia.
Was it Moses, God told Moses, as long as his hands were held up, they would win, just to raise his hands. And when his hands fell down, they started losing. So they got on two sides of him and held his hands up, arms up in the air for him, so that they'd won the battle. Many things. Okay.
Yeah. It's just humans being connected to the earth and the stars, which is so referenced in George's books. Go, Steffi. Go.
Okay, so like I'm gonna preach with this alongside this Cynthia and say
Please
the
do.
meat
I
shall
love it when you
inherit
guys
the
preach.
earth, right? It's like all faith, right? That everything is gonna go your way, right? Like it's meekness is not a weakness. I'm sorry. I've been really heavily into the Handmaid's Tale, and I've been diving into that, and I can't wait till September till the new book drops by Margaret Atwood. So yeah, so it's just that, like, it's just complete faith, and that's what Jamie references it to. It's complete faith in something, right? Like, no matter what, like, beautiful.
Okay, Ash, put your 2 cents worth in now.
Oh, sorry, I don't know if I'm muted or not. I love that you just brought up The Handmaid's Tale. Oh, cool. That's such a great book. I love that book. It was one of my favorites most of my life. But and you're right. Jamie does embody a lot of that, especially when he has that dream, which is on a weirwood stump, right? I mean, it's so interesting because he just lays down for a minute and he has the stream of blue flames and Bran and Rhaegar coming and all of them. It's like Judgment Day, for Jamie down in the bowels of Casterly Rock. And he and Bran have two blue flaming swords. And that's Oathkeeper and probably Widow's Wail, I would assume. And Rhaegar says, "Why didn't you protect my children?" And he's kind of ruthless, like Jaime's scared of him. And Cersei comes, but it's like, that's kind of, is it Cersei or is it Joanna, the hooded woman? It really is The Handmaid's Tale. It's like, it's that thing where, did Cersei give up a baby because it was a bastard, or because it was Robert's and she didn't want it, and a bastard to her would be from Robert, not from Jaime. So maybe that's why, but she still visited Gendry, which shows that conversation that they put in the show, which actually happens in the books, but it's very different, between Edmure and Jaime about motherhood and Cat and Cersei and their love of their children, and how that makes them good people no matter what, because they always protected and loved their children. And that's the whole thing. It's an argument that's going on right now in America, big time. So it's ruthless, this whole thing about, do you have the baby, do you abandon what you know is right, or do you do what you know is right that might be wrong in other people's eyes, right? It's kind of like the Scarlet Letter. So with that dream with Jaime, it's one of the most beautiful passages, I think, between Jaime's dream on the weirwood stump and the dream of sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. I just got distracted by my cats. By the visions of Bran and the visions of Jon by the ravens, and the visions of Brienne, the things she hears about the broken men, about the cripples, about all that stuff. It's kind of like it all ties into the blue. What is the blue? The blue is it's kind of like the kinder, and you also look at the trident. Those are blue, green, and yellow. Well, blue, green, and red, but yellow's made of one of those colors. So it's Right. Ice, fire, and earth. So it's kind of representative of the green seer, the blood of the dragon, and the ice of the Starks. So it's the Lancastrians of the War of the Roses and the Yorks, which formed House Tudor. So the red and of Lancaster, the blue of York, and Henry VIII starting, the House of Tudor, which it's just such a cool. I love the way this all translates into this story. He does it in such a cool way because Henry VIII was called the Winter King, Elizabeth was the Spring Queen, and I heard an interview with Sophie Turner that plays Sansa Stark, and she said that she envisioned Sansa as going on to not marry ever again. And I thought, well, there's our Elizabeth. Isn't that cool? I thought that was really cool because I always thought she's Queen Elizabeth and I want her on the Iron Throne. But the thing is, if Bran's on the Iron Throne, if Bran's on the throne, Sansa's really on the throne too. And I think that's the whole deal. Is John's on the throne, Sansa's on the throne, Arya's on the throne. So it's no longer a matter of succession, but it's a matter of still bloodlines. Right?
Not if they do what they say they're gonna do. Now I don't know if that part was in George's outlook of meeting there after any ruler dies to elect it from among the lords and all great council.
I think that's Parliament starting, right? Don't you?
Well, it's
like a parliament, sort of a parliament, not a parliament, but more of the people.
Go ahead.
It's like a senate.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
But like occupy like lands and like lords and stuff like that, right? It's the beginning of a constitutional monarchy, right? Where there's like laws that you need to abide to. Like it's kind of like in Canada, the Senate is ruled by people that own like I think it's like $100,000, but like in reality, it's like millions of dollars of land, right? And then they get a say into the Senate.
Right. So it's kind of like the Parliament of England still, where it's lords but you can still run for office for the prime minister, but it still has to pass the parliament, right? So I guess we're in the United States more of a democracy, and look what can happen, which is what Alexis de Tocqueville wrote about in the Renaissance. So I think a lot of this is kind of trying to introduce the Renaissance with we're not going to go through heirs and bloodlines. But to me, if Bloodraven is there, it's bloodlines. Because he will never let the Blackfires into that realm. Right? Or do you think he learned? Or maybe he learned. I was just going to pose that question to you. Did he learn that maybe the Blackfires are just like the Targaryens, just with a little different spin? Because, like I said, like George says, the dragon is red or black, it's still a dragon.
Well, why not the Blackfires? They're first men too. I mean, Bloodraven himself is a Blackfire. I mean, a Blackwood. I'm sorry, I meant Blackwood.
The Blackwood.
Yes, a Blackwood. And you don't know, but what? It's Bloodraven actually calling the shots now. I mean, it appears he's dead now, but he lives on within the werewood net. That's
within Bran.
And evidently within Bran, So, and I don't know. Like I say, I don't know. I really don't whether it will be succession in Bloodraven's, if he has control over Bran, or does he? See, these are questions that that George needs to answer in these coming up books after Bloodraven's gone. When Bran becomes Three-Eyed Raven, how much control does Bran actually have? And I'm hoping we'll get insight into all of that in the books. And I heard that he had said something about when he goes to New Zealand, that if he doesn't have the Winds of Winter out by then, that they can lock him up in New Zealand until he finishes it.
Oh, poor George. I swear, no man has ever been more pressured and harassed for writing a damn book than George R. R. Martin. But really, I mean, come on, dude. We know it. We can see it. I know you've got it. I think he has it done. I really do. I think he's just waiting for the show to be done and people to get their theories out there. And then, you know, the Long Night's supposed to come out by the end of the year. They're already filming it. It's Naomi Watts and a bunch of great actors. So it'll be really cool. But what I see is that we just came around to another age of heroes, right? John's like, you know, he's the sun god. He's Lu, he's Mithras, he's Jesus, he's all these people all rolled into one. Bran is kind of like he's the shaman. There's always a brother. It's about brothers in this story. Like the hero's journey is about fathers and sons. This story is about brothers. Don't you see? Do you guys see that connection too? I see it much more as brothers than fathers and sons. I mean, the fathers definitely have an influence on the sons, but it's the brothers who are always fighting each other. And I don't know why Bran was looking at Jon never smiling in the last season, but he wasn't very kind to Jon. And I don't think it had much to do with queenslaying either.
I don't know.
I don't either. I mean, I feel like this is the kind of thing that's going to come in the middle of the books, in the middle of the next couple books. Like Bran will become king in a way that makes it sort of like, we want to do this. We want to make it so that there's no heirs, direct heirs, so that some piece of shit like Joffrey can say he's the son of someone and take the throne, or like maybe Aegon the Third or somebody like that, somebody that's just kind of a nothing king. But I also see it as maybe something that's leading us into the Renaissance. It has to be, because we've got to be to about the 16th century by now.
Okay, if I'm gonna argue with like my thing of the books. I believe Bran is in Jon. Jon doesn't get the throne, but Sansa takes the throne, which leads her to Queen Elizabeth, right? Which is the constitutional monarchy. That's how I feel like it's going to go down in the books, right? Like
I do too.
Right? Like it doesn't make sense that these people would vote for Bran. Like I'm sorry to say that. Like there, like the physicality in the book. There's no one knows him. Right? He's not the last Greenseer. He doesn't know everything, right? Like there's too many ifs, ands, and buts for Bran to be king. Right? And then you're talking about like my arguments, like of testing him and doing all this thing. Like it just, there's too many. Right? Like if George R. R. Martin is going to do that in the span of 2 books to convince me that Bran deserves the throne, you better make damn well sure that I'm 100% hell-bent on him being king, because I'm not hell-bent on him right now. He's a mopey little tiny, I think he was born in 290, it's 303 in the book, so he's 13. So by the end of the book, he's probably going to be 316, which means he's going to be 16 years old. And he's going to be like Bran 3000 and no one's gonna give a shit about him. Like unless they test him and
Yeah.
then, like, and even if they test him, like, is he gonna bring justice or is he not gonna bring justice and get just fucking go hunt for Drogon? Like I'm sorry, but everything points to Bran not being king, but for Bran to be in Jon because he died, and for Jon to be in Ghost, and that's why Bran forced him to learn the third eye, right? For him to further his, to live a second life within Ghost and to slowly forget himself, like, you know nothing, right? You will forget everything about yourself, Rhaegar, everything, right? And then Bran will live beyond the wall.
It makes more sense to me too for that to happen, because it's kind of like Jon is a ghost. You know, he's kind of a ghost of himself. And I love the concept of Preston Jacobs' Bran 9000 or whatever it is. Like the Bran 9000 just computing. And it makes perfect sense. I love the way he put it that way, because it's like he was doing that for the last season, or however fast they sped it up, like the end of the last season and the very beginning of this season. But he was kind of downloading all the information, it seems like to me, and then he kind of got it straight. Like if Melisandre could actually see the way he can see, she might have gotten it, but she has these random faces and geographical locations and things like that she's not from Westeros, so she doesn't know, but Bran does. So, and he also sees things in order. She just sees random symbols. So it's easier for him to put them together and for him to be able to see the entire story in a timeline kind of thing, but also see all the other possibilities that could happen if maybe somebody didn't live or if somebody wasn't born, you know, all of that.
I'm gonna interrupt you. I believe Bran is incomplete. What is it? Where does the quote? It's Peter Baelish in the show, anyways. But like, I'm pretty sure George R. R. Martin is gonna shove this in the book. The Realm. Do you know what the Realm is? It's 1,000 blades of Aegon's enemy. A story we agreed to tell each other over and over until we forget that it's a lie. Bran is the lie. It's the biggest lie that George R. R. Martin could have shoved to D&D to completely screw them over because they didn't do justice to the show. Like, I think George R. R. Martin said after season 4 or season 3, he sat down with them and told them like bulletins of what's going to happen. But I think at that point, George R. R. Martin saw season 3 and looked at them and said, "You're going to fuck up my show." And he fucking told them lies. That's what I think. I think George R. R. Martin is the most vengeful person alive right now. What's that stupid gift that always is going around? Hold on, let me look it up. It's like one of my favorite things. My biggest dream was to ruin the lives of my readers and crush their souls. Right? So that was George R. R. Martin's dream for D&D. To crush the souls. To be like, you fucked up. That was not my story. Right? Like, you screwed up so badly.
It's exactly like, and I'm sorry to bring up politics right now, but it's exactly what's going on right now in the world, is that some people are saying, oh, climate change doesn't exist. And George just came out not long ago, before the 8th season was released. He said, the White Walkers are kind of climate change. They really are. So we're fighting climate change. We're fighting to save the world, right? So it seems to me like he's doing a little bit of a political argument with fucking pay attention to what's going on instead of trying to pass abortion laws and whatever, you know. I mean, I don't mean to offend anybody, but this is, if we don't have an earth to live on, it doesn't matter what goes on that earth. First, we got to save the earth. And that's the War for the Dawn. It really is. And I think maybe that's why George said he might have given, what I read is that he gave him like 10 different endings and said you can do whatever one you want, you know? And they chose to do this one. And maybe it was the easy way out. Maybe it was the way that they saw as being the more, yeah, I see it as the easy way out. But I also see it as maybe being a little bit of the political landscape that's going on in the world right now as a reflection of that. Yeah, I mean, not in the whole scope of everything, but as far as climate change goes, and the others bringing the ice and snow and cold, that's what's happening. So are we going to pay attention to it, or are we going to let the earth die? And that's why Bran is king.
Ashley, that I like disagree with you. If I could,
I know you're gonna go insane. I know you're gonna go insane. That's why I said it.
Like, all I really want is a common sense, like, political leader, right? Like, at the end of the day, to see like both sides and to find the middle ground and to see.
Good Christ, are you talking to Americans?
Okay, I find I as a Canadian would have voted for Trump. Am I wrong? Clearly,
I know you would have.
I clearly would have been wrong, but I didn't vote. That's why, like, I'm still dealing with like tariff shit. So
it doesn't really matter now, does it?
But like, would Hillary have been any better? I'm pretty sure no, right? Like, can we just have someone that's kind of middle and not a fucking retard, like, in there, like, that has money and can support a campaign and do their shit? But yeah, it's just like a common sense leader. That's like all I advocate for. Like, really, like, I just want that. But in this, like, when it comes to climate change, I'm gonna have to disagree with you on that, because like I know, like, Canada produces 1.6 GHG emissions, right? And it doesn't make sense for us to sacrifice for the other, like, 98 whatever percent. It doesn't make sense for me to sacrifice the 36 million people, which basically equals to 0.4% of the population of the entire world, in order to serve them. It doesn't make sense. What I would do is probably have hefty tariffs on those countries like China, India, right? Bangladesh, all those people that litter and do all that stuff that is horrible, and then serve the global economic superiority of the entire human race, right? That's what makes sense to me. But like, I'm gonna get away from that because it just doesn't make sense to sacrifice Canadians, right? Or 0.4% of the population.
It doesn't make sense to sacrifice anyone.
No, but you're talking about the white race is 800,000 people. That's in North America.
I'm sorry I was putting on lipstick, but that's how I feel about this. Is that, like, if we don't have an earth to live on,
let's say if we took the entirety of Europe and North America, which are the global economic hubs of the world outside of Russia and China.
We do
be able to do shit in comparison to what China does to the world. That's despite
we could, though, because the U.S. produces more than anyone else.
But what would
we won't get into that here. You know I love you so much.
I love you too. It's okay.
This is the beauty of actual, like, women and friendship. It really is. This right here is what it's about. Mm-hmm. Is people just loving each other no matter what their beliefs, no matter how much we disagree. Yeah. And I can put on lipstick while Steffie's talking about whatever she is.
Walking you down at the same time. But yeah, we gotta respect each other's beliefs, and we do. We have to have differing beliefs,
and I believe that's why there's. I'm sorry, Nan. Go ahead.
I was just saying we need to accept accept and love each other the way we are. I mean, you can't change people. It's not your
No.
place to go around changing people. You can't. You
Right.
can try, but it'll backfire. I can tell you that.
Well, I think that's,
People have
to go back to politics, that's why Hillary didn't make it, because she called other people
well,
deplorables. You
I'm
can't
just
do that.
saying we have a free will, and I think that I'm glad to live where I live. No
Yeah.
matter what the problems, I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that we're able to get together, the three of us, and do what we do.
Me
And I
too.
pray that we'll keep on being able to do that.
And we will. I mean, and the greatest thing is that we are all different women. You live in the South. Steffie lives in Canada. I live in the Rocky Mountains. So, and I've lived in LA, and I've seen the world, and I'm sure you two have also. But there's just, the thing is that there's a general. That's what you were talking about, man, with the cord in the rope, in metaphysical terms, when you're talking about like the way to get back to your body, right? And George has said a million times that he based Relorianism off of Zoroastrianism and the Cathars. And I'm sure Cynthia, and probably you, Steffi, too, the Albigensian Crusade, the first crusade ever launched, was against the Cathars, and they were basically fire worshippers. Well, Zoroastrians were fire worshippers who kept the eternal flame burning so that it could burn through the darkness. And
Okay, I
it's
have
more
something to
complex than
clarify.
that.
I have to
Yeah,
clarify.
Ashton, you gotta stop right now. Like, no.
I got to clarify something on that.
Go ahead,
As
No,
go ahead.
because you have to, when you get into all of that, the fire worshippers were the ones that worshipped Moloch.
Right.
And that was all through the Old Testament. And that's why that a lot of them, they were sacrificing their children to the fire. And that's why a lot of them were.
The Cathars?
No, this goes way back. Way back. The people who worship, I was going to say Relor, but it was Moloch. So that could come into some of what the fire worship is too. And they very much, did that. And it was a big thing, the fire. And that's one of the reasons why the children of Israel were supposed to cleanse the land.
Right. And those are the 72 tribes, right?
There was only 12 tribes of Israel, honey.
Okay, so I don't know the Bible like you do. I really don't.
Oh, whoa. You're talking about the first crusades was against the Muslims. That's what it was against. It was against the Turks, right? It was against the forming of the mullah, against the imams of fucking the Middle East. That's what it was against.
Exactly.
Well, that's not
the
what I'm
crusades
talking about.
meant certain things right throughout history. The first crusades was against the Turks, right? And like, that was just like,
well,
you're talking about.
I think the
Muslims wiped out the Jewish people, and that's what caused the first crusades, because they thought that was their history and their heritage, and they're like, why are you destroying it? It doesn't make sense, right? So they sent in 1/4, and they died, and most of them died. The crusades, most of them failed epically, but because of them, their sacrifices, they stemmed off that.
Okay, so I'm going to read something really quick.
You're thinking about with fire worship, that goes way, way back to Old Testament days and stuff.
Yes,
and
it does.
There was I think that what was the Hittites? were
Yes.
fire worship?
Well,
I don't know. Don't quote me on that, but you
I
know
don't
what
know.
I'm saying. And so they did. They sacrificed their firstborn, to their children to the fire.
Okay, so I'm going to read you the Albigensian Crusade. It's the Albigensian Crusade or the Cathar Crusade, and I could, I read it. I read this from the side of Gnosticism, not Catholicism. So they call it the First Crusade. It might not be the First Crusade. It might be the big lie, though, also, because it's called the Albigensian Heresy or the Cathar Heresy, because the Cathars were a sect of Christianity who were basically a genocide was committed against these people by Pope Innocent III and a French or a Roman general.
That was the
Simon-
one at
Simon-
the mountain. That was the one at the mount. Is that the one at the Mount Steffie where they all committed
it was the first one. The first crusade was against the Jerusalem, and then the expansion into Constantinople.
Well, that went
And then
that
it
went on
shrunk
forever.
back, right? But that was the first crusade. You're taking certain battles out. I understand what you're saying,
Okay.
but like to me,
Okay.
I
I see what you're saying too.
I think that
Okay.
Cathars,
I see what you're saying.
I think they were they not? Who was the ones that were at the Mount of Megiddo? No, not Megiddo. Is it Megiddo?
Of
Where the
Montsegur was the Cathars in southern France and northern Spain.
Oh, okay. Those are there is in southern France.
It was a genocide.
That is the ones who were thought to have worshipped, had Mary Magdalene.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they had her in there with Jesus and all that. That comes from that Dan
Right.
Brown book.
Oh,
The first one.
does it really? Did he write a book about that? I love Dan Brown, but I haven't read that one.
Well, the one that he was talking about Mary and
Oh,
Christ
about
having a
the
child.
Da Vinci Code about Mary Magdalene. And, okay, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. The thing is
Were
that
those not the Cathars?
Uh-huh.
Were those not the Cathars?
Those were the Cathars as far as I know, but I don't know if Dan Brown said ever that it was the Cathars. He just said that they followed the Knights Templar took Mary's Book of Love teachings into the south of France, into the north of Spain, and that they were not following necessarily, well, they were following Jesus, but they were more following Mary and her Book of Love that was left out of the Bible, as far as I know. That's what he was saying in his book.
The first Crusades encompassed so much. It was like it was almost like a breaking point. It was like they expanded so far west or east that they hit the Hindu territory, and then they expanded so far west that they hit the Christian territory, and then they decided to shrink from both sides, basically. But the first Crusades were against basically the Turks. And to be like, you got to stop this shit. Like, you're the pathway into our homeland. You got to stop this shit. Right? It was pressure
that
on.
was what the Cathars said. Yeah. The Cathars said, you're too greedy. The Vatican or the church has gotten too big. It's gotten corrupt. And this was in like 12th century AD. And they were saying, our priests are equal to us. They were called prefects or perfects. And yes, the church is still very corrupt, and it is disgusting. But this was the beginning of what I see is like the kind of the Old Town, High Tower maesters and the Iron Bank is kind of the same sort of construct as the Vatican and the, the priests of, that were taking crusades around.
Okay, so I'm going to
Maybe-
intercept there for a
Under the
second.
Palestine.
Yeah,
Sorry,
go
Steph.
ahead, Steph.
I'm going to intercept there and say, what about the Faith of the Seven? Because to me in the
That's
book,
what I mean.
the Faith of the Seven represents Christianity and the
That's what I
downfall
mean
of
by Old
Christianity.
Town. Yeah.
Because you're talking about in like Western society today, like Christianity is plummeting. Catholicism, Protestantism, like everything is plummeting. You're talking about like Canada today. I think it's like from the last consensus, which was like 2011, it's like 67% believe in Christianity, which is encompassing like everything, right? Like Orthodox, right? Christianity, and then Catholicism, Protestant, everything. Like they encompass all that into one group, and then everyone else, it just keeps dwindling down, right? Like it like you're talking about in the past 5 decades, it's dwindled down by 30%. It used to be 99.7% in Canada in the 70s, right? You're talking about a huge plummet, right? And you have no idea why, right? Like why, right? Like,
I think because Gnosticism came back around, and also that, interestingly, this is something I found just looking through Bran's my research on Bran, is the goddess, and we all know who she is. She's Isis, and she's also Mary. But she was called originally Ashara with an H on the end, which is really pretty interesting. She was revered in Israel as Atharit, Earth Mother and fertility goddess. She was Yahweh's wife, Elohim's wife, God's wife, the Queen of Heaven. And she's in the Bible. It was a title given to the number of sky goddesses worshipped throughout the ancient Mediterranean and Near East. In ancient times, goddesses referred by the title include Inanna, Anat, Isis, Astarte, and possibly Asherah by Jeremiah the prophet. So Asherah was revered in Israel, now Israel, as Atharit, Earth Mother and goddess of fertility, and God's wife, Yahweh's wife.
Okay.
From a treasure trove of cuneiform texts found in the 2nd millennium port of the city of Ugarit in what's now northern Syria, which I think is a lot of the reason why these wars are going on. And they keep taking down the idols and crushing temples and taking scrolls and things like that. For hundreds of years of Abraham, before Abraham migrated to the new Israel, Asherah, Astarte, Isis was revered when the ancient Israelites entered the region. They soon adopted her and renamed her as the Hebrew equivalent name of by Asherah. In 1928, she was found again at the Ugarit, same excavation site as in the 2nd millennia BC, and put back on the map. So that's our mother goddess that was called the Holy Ghost. So they're saying, in these cuneiform writings that, you know what I mean.
This is Babylonian cuneiform writings. Is this where you're getting all this from?
Well, it's from even before that. It's probably Assyrian.
Okay.
Mesopotamia. Yeah.
I would think it would be Assyrian, Mesopotamian, Babylonian, or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. But it was in the 2nd century BC, so it would have been, Mesopotamian, Sumerian.
God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Ghost, and then
and the Holy Ghost was said to be.
Yeah, it's in Afghanistan, so it's very close, right? Like Syria, the Levant, or whatever they call it now.
Right. I'm sorry, Nan. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I forgot where I was going with that now.
You were saying that about the goddess of the wife of God.
I
And
no, the only thing I can say about that is I never, I don't know of anything like that except that there are the 7 aspects of God, and that's the only thing I have heard or read about, and it's and one of the aspects of God is a feminine, but they're all one God. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, the Holy
Well,
Trinity. Yeah, I know what you mean by
well,
the Holy
See,
Trinity.
that's
But
the
what this
difference between the religions. They do, like in Christianity, they view it as like you honor Mary, but like in the
yeah,
Muslim religion, you don't honor Mary, right?
right.
It's not equal. It's not egalitarianism in the sense of it. Like it's absent of it, right? Like there's no
Right.
homage to it.
Holy Ghost being Mary. I've never heard of the Holy Ghost
Well,
being Mary.
that's what I was trying to explain is that what they've found in cuneiform texts in northern Syria, which is now northern Syria, they had found in the 2nd millennia BC, which is figurines in every household, in every belief system having to do
But
with God, that God
they were
had a
pagan.
wife,
They were
that God had
pagan.
a wife. No, it's not pagan. That's the interesting part
It's
of it is that
Jewish. It's Jewish.
it is
I've
Jewish.
never heard.
Yes, it is. I think it is Jewish because it comes from, she's called the Queen of Heaven, and it's a title given to a number of sky goddesses in the Bible, worshipped throughout the ancient Mediterranean and Near East in ancient times. Goddesses referred by the title include Inanna, Anat, Isis, Astarte, and possibly Ashara with an H on the end, by Jeremiah the prophet. So she was revered in what now, yeah,
Jeremiah was the prophet that was in Israel at the destruction by Babylon. He was
right,
there during all of that. He was spent a lot of his time in a hole full of mire up to his waist. He was he was not killed because he told them that this that is happening. You know, it is of God that this is happening because of their ways. But and
mm-hmm.
it's also
They're sinning
said
ways.
that he took 2 daughters from that were the king's daughters. They killed all the
Right,
king's sons. But he took those 2 daughters and they traveled to Egypt. And so
right.
these are the queens, were the new, the bloodline through which um, went these people went to France and England. What's that place in England where uh,
Where what?
there were 10 mines there? The one that and what was the one that claimed Christ's body, Steffi, after they took him off the cross? Can't think of his name right now. Um, he was a relative, but he had mines in
Hold on,
England.
I'm gonna interrupt Cynthia for a second. They're called the Despot Mines in Italy. That's what they're called. It's in Italy. It's Constantinople. That's what it is, right?
Yes, right. Okay, I know what you're talking about. Okay, I'm up to
Well,
date.
they went and settled in Scotland, Skoda was one of those descendants of that. Supposedly. Now, that's just what I've been told.
Right. See,
That's
I mean, we could go on with this all night. Like, really, we could go on with this all week. But this is the whole thing, I think, that George is trying to point out here, is that we have a lot of different conflicting views of what happened in the past. And yes, it is semantics. It some of it's semantics, some of it's fact against truth. And I think the Cathars are a big example of someone who was called a heresy, who were not a heresy at all, and did not deserve to have genocide committed against them.
No, whoa.
Their whole no, really. The thing about the Cathars that George is trying to say, this is not coming from me. I have researched this because of George, because he says that R'hllor is based on Zoroastrianism and the Albigensian Crusade of the Cathars. There's your sister. Hi. You're such a cutie pie. I love her. Anyway, we're getting into religious debate. Don't come into the room right now.
Can you hear the rain?
See, this is the thing where we're just going to get into, like, you know, we're going to get into arguments about religion, and I don't want to do that. But what I want to say is that this is where George is coming from and what he said before. That R'hllor is based on Zoroastrianism and the Cathars. And when you look at the Cathars, there's so many conflicting opinions about what happened in the Albigensian Crusade. But the reality of what happened in the Albigensian Crusade that's been written, Steffie's sister's leaving the room now. Bye.
Doing.
She's like, screw this. Bye. So I know, Steffie. So anyway, let me talk. I feel like I'm on The View, for God's sake. So anyway, this is what I've learned about the Cathars. The Cathars were a sect that may have come from Thoth, the Atlantean, who was the messenger of the gods, who became Hermes in Roman mythology, who became Mercury in Greek mythology, who could have become anyone, actually. Thoth was the scribe who brought us language, who brought us the alphabet, who brought us basic knowledge from Egypt. And I'm, that's my kind of thought about Thoth. But Thoth is Hermes and Mercury. He is. So this is what Wikipedia says. The Cathars originated from an anti-materialist reform movement within the Bogomil churches of Dalmatia and Bulgaria, calling for a return to the Christian message of perfection, poverty, and preaching, combined with a rejection of the physical to the point of starvation. The reforms were a reaction against the often scandalous and dissolute lifestyles of the Catholic clergy in southern France. Their theology, neo-Gnostic in many ways, which is really Gnostic, was basically dualist. Every religion was dualist, though. Like, stuff. And I heard the wine smells good too, right?
Let me talk for a second. Look at the label and remember it. This wine smells amazing. New Zealand, you're flipping amazing. I don't know what you put in.
How well this wine smells.
I've been talking about it for hours, literally.
It smells so good. It smells so good. Fuck you. You're in Canada. I want some. But Cheers was absent from Amsterdam. Anyway, so what I understand about the Cathars, and this I know is a very, very, very big debate still, and it rages on since the 12th century. But what I understand about the Cathars is that they had a religion that was based seemingly more on Mary than it was on the fact that Jesus was a living being. It was on the fact that
That's what
Jesus was
I
not
said.
a living being, that he was an idea, a reminder of Horus, of Mithras, Mithras was a reminder. All of them are reminders. Lu of the long arm, the sun god of Celtic mythology, they were all reminders of Horus from Egypt, and probably of God before him from, the Göbekli Tepe or something like that, which was the last ice age, mini ice age in Europe. So the reforms, they also had priests who they were outspoken against the Catholic Church and the Vatican before it was the Vatican. They said, you're corrupt. You've only been in power for 10 millennia, and you're already corrupt. You're already screwing up. You're already leaving Mary out of the doctrines and the Bible, and you're equating priests higher than people. And their belief was that priests were on the same level as they were. They called them prefects or perfects. And they lived among the people, just like George writes the Faith of the Seven, the good brothers, I think they were called, or the good priests. They were equal with the people, and they lived even lower than the people, kind of like the High Sparrow, but not with so much fanaticism. And they made sure that they were lower than whatever neighborhood or whatever region they lived in. So they weren't richer and, wearing velvet shoes and things like that. They were not influenced with material greed, earthly material greed. So what it says in Wikipedia is between 1022 and 1163, the Cathars were condemned by 8 local church councils, the last of which, held at Tours, declared that all Albigensians should be put into prison and have their property confiscated. What I know of them is that we don't know even how many of them there were. And it seems like almost hundreds of thousands, kind of like King's Landing. Like, it's said to be 1 million people, but it could be hundreds of thousands, which Danny burned at the end of season 8. So they were people who followed the Cathars, not the Catholic Church. The Cathars, though, were Christians and were a sect of the Catholic Church, of Christianity. And at one point, George talks about this a lot, where Pope Greg, or Sir Gregory, Lord Gregory something, Gregory was the commander of the Roman army, and Pope Innocent III had led this Albigensian crusade against the Cathars. So what George always talks about is how Gregory came to his commander and said, I can't tell the difference after 42 years between these people and myself. They're Christians, we're Christians. What are we doing here? And they killed them all. This is where they advanced a lot of torture techniques, a lot of like the rack, of waterboarding, of, stretching, things like that, really horrifying medieval techniques. And then they killed them all off in fire by marching them into a crematorium and killing basically women and children. So that's what the modern day record of the Cathars, and what George says about the Cathars is what he's written into these books as R'hllorianism. So please, ladies, rebut me all you want. And it's not me, it's George, really. It's not me, it's George. I didn't even know about this until George talked about it.
Not George. It's you. The Kafars are unbelievers in the Muslim religion, and they're treated like fucking shit. They're basically they were told to wear belts because that's how skinny they were from doing slave labor in the Islamic world, in the Ottoman Empire, and everything like that, which is what the Crusades fought against, right? They were destroying everything. It's just no. I'm not gonna get into this with you. It's just you gotta research stuff. Like I understand you know certain parts, and it's truthful in what you say in certain parts. But like in the major scope of it,
all I've researched honestly is what is available to research, and I researched this because of what George said.
the kafir in the Islamic religion in Arabic, which is the closest thing to the actual Bible, is that you are an unbeliever, right? You're a denier of God. You're an infidel, and you should be killed
Right.
at your neck.
Yeah, that's why they were called a heresy.
Like that's what he's relating. Like if you're saying that's what he's relating it to, like to me, there's no one in Game of Thrones that you would just kill for the sake of killing because of some religion. Because
what about R'hllorianism?
But no, but what has R'hllor fought against?
The darkness. That's
The
it.
The darkness, but what is the darkness
That's
against?
it.
About death.
The darkness against. There was no such thing as Satan, as far as I know, until like 5th century, 6th century.
No.
It didn't enter the Bible until like later on. The name Satan itself. But this isn't coming from me. This is coming from what I've heard from George, and I've done my own research on it. So I've read many books about it. I'm not uninformed about this at all. But I don't want to start a big, religious debate because it never gets anywhere. And I don't want to piss anybody off, and I don't want to go into it. All I want to say is that this is what George has said he has based R'hllorianism on. The fact that Pope Innocent III sent a Roman legion into the Albigensian part of France and killed the Cathars over a 42-year period, which is recorded in history. That's all I'm saying.
42. Are you sure about that? 42.
That's what the history books say, but it changes every year. It literally changes every year. How many people died, how
for the sake of honoring them because they were Cathars, right?
That's what
the Islamic texts say. Like it just doesn't make sense what you're like saying.
I don't know what the Islamic texts say. I have no idea. All I'm doing is telling you what I heard from what I heard George say.
Stop. Okay,
and
I
look back ladies. It's pretty late now. We got to.
We clearly.
I don't want to get into a religious debate, you guys. I'm not religious. I'm really not. I don't want to get into a religious debate. All I'm telling you is facts that I've heard, that I've read, that I've looked up, that I've researched, that I've found out, is that these people were following the Book of Mary, and they were following the Book of Love that Mary wrote, and they were following an idea of Jesus, not Jesus as a man himself, and they were condemned because of that. That's what I'm just saying. That's what George has said. He based R'hllorianism off of.
I think we're gonna have to. I have the Dead Sea Scrolls, some of them somewhere, all printed out. So we're gonna have to get into some of that another time, ladies.
Yeah, we can do that another time. It's fine. I don't mean to start a debate here. I have no stake in either game. I really don't.
We all had our, done our research and everything.
I've done a
And
lot of research
because,
on this.
well, I think, we need to do some research
I
and
think
get back on that. And
the bottom line of it
something that
is, I'm sorry, Cynthia, go ahead.
I was just saying that that's something, we could always branch out and do something like that in the future.
Yeah, we could. It's a good idea
But
because
we have
this
to
is
have our facts straight. And me and Steffi need to do a little bit of studying to catch up with wherever you are at. So,
well, I think that what it comes down to is just the basic fact of dualism and Manichaeism, of good and evil, black and white. That's the thing that George is getting at, is that there is no good and evil, and you can't, and as J.R.R. Tolkien said, you can't defeat evil with good. Evil will destroy itself, right?
No, what I'm getting from this is you're trying to compare Rellorianism in the book sense to Islamism, and it's completely different.
No, I'm saying what George said is that he compares Rellorianism to Zoroastrianism and the Cathars, and that's what he said. That's all I'm saying.
I would think it would be more of the Moloch. And
He's said many times
things like
Cathars.
that. Yeah, I
It has
don't
nothing to
know
do with
about
it
that.
because Israel didn't even exist then.
Excuse me?
Well, I mean, it in a sense it did,
You
but
mean
as it was the Holy Land, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So that's
after
I'm going to interrupt for a second. I'm sorry, Cynthia.
Titus destroyed Jerusalem and the temple in 77 AD, 70 something AD, and then there was no state of Israel after that.
Right.
I mean, there was, but it wasn't what it used to be.
Well, it went back and forth between the Muslims and the Catholics for a long time.
But like, what you're trying to you're saying, how can I put it? Like, I'm picking out a certain periodic piece of what George R. R. Martin is saying, right? Like the War of Roses and all that stuff, and trying to like expand a bit to his imaginary timeline, which I think is more condensed.
Yeah.
To you, you're going to the oldest religion and picking out the thing, and going to like 7th century, like First World Crusade stuff, and that it's just so devoid of each other. Like, it's evolved, like the evolution that has happened between that time span is so astronomical. It's not even funny.
It's of course it's much more complex than just one thing. Of course it is. But what he talks about most of all, and I've watched a video where he talks about the fact that Pope Innocent III sent in he says the First Crusade. I don't know if it is or not because I'm not a Bible scholar. But what he says is that it came out of the Albigensian Crusade, which is called the Albigensian heresy, which really wasn't a heresy because they were a sect of Christianity, but they just opposed the power that the Catholic Church was amassing and the corrupt intent or the corrupt nature of the church at that point in time, and that they killed off the Cathars to stop talking out against them.
Well, the church had a lot of power back then, more, really a lot, and all that. But I think a lot of things that you're mixing, when you mix up Isis and Mary and these different things, I believe, and I'm not an expert on this, but I believe Isis is considered a god in Egyptian religion
She
of
is.
that
She
period.
is, but she's also in the
But
Bible.
Mary Magdalene and all is not considered a god. She is the mother of Christ.
No,
But
not Mary.
And even Mary
But
Magdalene, I understand where you're coming from with the Mary Magdalene and the Dan Brown stuff and all that. But even
no, I'm not coming from Dan Brown.
Okay.
No, I'm coming from. See, what I'm saying is. I'm sorry, what?
I said, you're confusing me, and I'm too old to be too confused because I stay confused enough as it is.
Oh, I love you, honey. I love you so much. I'm not trying to confuse you. All I'm saying is that what I researched last night was from a site that was from the Gnostic Church, which says that the Queen of Heaven is a title given to a number of sky goddesses worshipped throughout the ancient Mediterranean and Near East in ancient times. Goddesses referred to by the title include Inanna, Anat, Isis, Astarte, and Ashara by Jeremiah the prophet. Asherah was revered in Israel now as Atharat, the earth mother and fertility goddess, and she was known as God's wife. That was unveiled in the 2nd century BC from a treasure trove of cuneiform tablets found in the 2nd millennium port city of Ugarit in what is now northern Syria. For hundreds of years before Abraham migrated to New Israel, she was revered. When the ancient Israelites entered the region, they soon adopted her and renamed her the Hebrew equivalent name of Ashara. In 1928, she was found again at the Ugarit excavation site, the same one from the 2nd millennia, and put back on the map. So the mother goddess was brought back.
I see what you're doing. Abraham lived in that region. The people of that region worshipped many gods. Abraham's father was made gods. He was, he did the building and making of the golden gods and whatever. And God spoke to Abraham, and the conversation there. Anyway, Abraham did not believe in the gods that his father built because he saw his father building them and did not think they were real. And that was, how did it go? Somebody out there can probably, in the comments, can probably clarify. He broke all the false gods and said, if they're gods, then let them fix themselves. And they come back the next day and they weren't fixed. So that's when Abraham was told by God to leave that land and go to what is now Israel. And every place he set his foot would be his descendants. And they are not just the Israelites. He after Sarah, he married again. And he had his handmaids that they, that's the children of Median, the children of another Media. Anyway, there's another couple of them up there. I think, was it Cora who he married? I don't know. I'll have to research it. But yeah, the gods you're talking about, this goddess of heaven and all that, that was one of those goddesses that was in the land that he broke up, basically. I think that's where you're getting them. You're trying to put that in with the biblical story of Abraham and confusing that with that. Does that make sense? Steffi, help me out here.
It makes sense to me, yeah.
It makes
So,
sense to me what you're saying. Perfectly clear.
Yeah, you're probably right, because I mean, I'm just going by what I've researched. I'm not a Bible person. I'm not. So what you
I think
guys,
if
you
you're going
know,
to talk about it, maybe you should, you got to research it too.
I've researched
Um,
it so much, but there's so many conflicting beliefs is the thing, and they've found so many different things that refute these things. That's all I'm saying. I'm just saying this is where George has said, and I've listened to him talk about it and say the Cathars were put down by Pope Innocent III. That's all.
My
I'm just saying
problem.
what he said.
I'm
And
sorry.
I've researched it a lot.
My problem with Ash's statement is her arguments are trying to prove the Renaissance and in the present, and what I'm trying to prove is that as well, at least like the in between phases of it, and what she's trying to provide evidence for is the oldest religion, and it doesn't make sense to the influence of to the story right now, right? Like to me, it doesn't make sense why you're like to Cynthia's points. It makes sense of her the development in the Bible, right? Like Korah, right? Like Korah was the son of Israel. He remembered the rebellious actions against Jotham and Abraham against Moses, according to Numbers 60, 20, 21, right? Like, and the Quran, the Cathars contradict that. That's what I'm saying. Like, there's like a lot of semantics in there that you're trying to weigh out to push your vision forward. And what I'm saying is, no, you have to condense that. You're like what I'm saying is, I'm in the I don't know, I guess the 21st century, right? The age of technology, and I shouldn't be influenced by the 16th century because it's evolved that far. Like, as much as I honor my heritage and as much as I do that, and as much as I am influenced by that as an identitarian, it can only go so far, right? Because it's been manipulated and twisted, and history has been won over by the victors, and it's been written by them, and whatever. You're talking about like a 90-year-old in Germany just got sent to jail for a bunch of years because she questioned the Holocaust. Like like you lived through the Holocaust. Like, you should be fucking questioning it if you didn't see shit go down and you lived in a major city like that. Like, why wouldn't you be questioning that? Right? Like, it's a bunch of semantics put in to make I, and us disagree when we should be working for a common goal amongst humanity, which is the common folk. The common folk are the centerpiece, and we should be doing whatever we can to better us. That's my point, anyways. And I apologize to everyone that like if I insulted your religion or whatever. I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm going to throw it back to what we were talking about previously because it's 12:30. So I'm just going to shout it out because I don't know what the other ladies are doing. Maybe they're angry. I don't know. I hope not, because I've been drinking and it's not good. It's not good for my buzz.
We're still here. We're not angry, honey.
Okay, so I said in the beginning that Rickon might have been wild, but Bran was also solemn, right? Like, it depends on what you want to go for. Robb started caring for Rickon, caring for Bran. Bran did the opposite to Catelyn, who was seeking justice, and Robb was trying to seek justice, but Rickon didn't, right? It's opposites attract. The hierarchy of the direwolves: Lady Shaggy Dog, Summer, Grey Wind, Ghost. Ghost was the runt of the litter. Then there was Lady, who was supposed to be queen. Shaggy Dog, who was supposed to go nowhere. Summer, who was supposed to make it to the end. And Grey Wind, who was supposed to be lost in the mist, or the wind. What words are wind, right? All of his words were wind. Robb's words. Arya killed all the Freys. I think Ashley made a point about Arya killing everybody of the Freys, and Rhaegar named every single one of his children after a historical figure. Okay. Grendel and Goran, the tunnels to the north, built the tunnels to the north, and we were arguing the Davos segment. And I still don't believe Bran will be king because he wanted to be a knight. I feel like his last battle was with the Night King. That's my personal perspective. How am I going to do this? I'm sorry, I'm trying to throw it back so we get off this religion topic, which is a lot of debate.
Thank you.
Greenside. Sorry.
I'm sorry, you guys. I didn't mean to throw it there. I really didn't. All I meant to say was that this is what George had said, and it went off, and I'm sorry. But all I'm saying, I have no religion, really. I mean, I was raised with no religion for a reason. My parents had a big reason for that because I was born in Utah. So you can just draw your own conclusions from where that comes from. But I majored in ancient history, and I minored in languages. So the thing about it is that's kind of funny is that I have done a lot of research on all of this stuff, but we all have our different opinions, and it doesn't matter. I mean, it really doesn't, because I love you guys, and that's the beauty of this stuff, is that we can love each other, and that I think that's what George is doing with these books, and that's what's so beautiful. And that's why I think everybody who watches the show should read the books, because it brings you into a world that challenges your beliefs and that challenges everything you're about. And here comes Stefan, as always. But anyway, the thing about it is that I don't have any stake in the game. I really don't. I don't have a stake in the game to cause any problems, to cause any like dissent. I really don't. My heart. I'm a kind person.
We'll redirect you, darling. Don't you worry. But that link I just
Well,
sent
you don't need to redirect me, but thank you.
I wish you would check that out, and he explains everything so that even anybody can understand.
You know what I'll do?
He does bring out all of the astrology of the Bible. He goes into all of that. So I think
really
you
does.
will find it very.
No,
Yeah.
I do.
I mean, this link that I sent you, that he even goes into that. So there's a whole section on that. So
thank you.
Check it out.
All I've heard is that, and I've read a lot about this stuff, and I've researched it quite a bit since I heard him say it, because it was a couple years ago that he said it. But I've looked at it, and I know there's a big deal about whether Jesus was actually a man or whether he was Horus incarnated, just to remind us, as Mithras and everybody else was. But that's not, it's here nor there. The thing about it is that's what he based Relorianism off of, is the eternal flame of the Zoroastrianism. He even has a hard time saying it. He goes, I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm not going to say it. So
translation chat. It's social engineering to manipulate your behavior and your thought process. That's about it. To tell you what.
Well, have you guys
give us a shout? Is there anybody we need to say hi to?
Well, we've had Alicia Kingston stop by, which I'm so happy about. She left, but I'm so glad she stopped by.
I appreciate that.
I love her.
I think we're gonna have to kind of wind it down here, ladies, and we'll discuss what we're gonna do next after we close this session. Oh, I'm on
probably should,
and I thank you for coming. And ladies, y'all go ahead.
Okay, I'm Ashley from the Iron Underneath, Lady Ashley. And you can find my videos under the Iron Underneath. I want to just thank Alicia Kingston for stopping by. You're my girl, and I love you. And Eberito Jose, I think, says hi. And I lost the chat from, I think it's your friend Steffie. I'll let you say hi to him. But I just wanted to say thanks for everyone for stopping by and everybody who will watch this again. And I hope you don't get too caught up in our last minute religious debate, which I really do have no stake in. I really don't. I don't care one way or another. I don't judge. I really, really, truly don't. My heart is open. And I don't want anyone to think that I have a prejudice either way against any person on this earth, because I really don't. I love all people. I really do. And that's from my heart. So I just needed to say that. I love you all so much. And thank you for watching. And we'll see you again soon. Sorry, our brand topic got a little off center, but whatever. That's what happens. Love you all. Steph?
I'm sorry, I was interrupting you with my laughs. I didn't realize my mic was on. I went through 2 bottles of wine today. Please forgive me. This was my pick. Here, everybody. Let's show that again, if you can see it. It was amazing. The smell was amazing. Yeah, cheers. Like, obviously. Obviously, I'm clearly not biblically literate like Cynthia is, or historically literate like Ashley is. I'm more present, and that's technically why I don't believe in Bran, and I guess that's why the topic is, because the ladies gave me way with this episode, and I was like, why the fuck Bran? I didn't understand it, and I still don't understand it because none of it makes sense, and I guess we won't understand until George R. R. Martin releases the rest of his books. So George,
I think that's the deal. I do. I think that's the deal, is that we need to see the rest of the books. Like, that's the whole deal. Right? Don't you guys think?
no,
I mean, we haven't had the full...
We need all
we
the
haven't had the
books
full...
in order to make sense of this. It's going to be better in the book.
It's true, because, and I know Bloodraven's going to come into it big time, and I think we addressed that this time, and I'm proud of us for doing that, because I think we tied in Bloodraven as well as we could with Bran, because it's all Bloodraven. It's all Bloodraven, you guys. Read the Duncan Eggs. It's all Bloodraven. And look at Sir Maynard Plum while you're reading it, please.
I will definitely look into the plums. That's for sure, because Ashley asked. but like, I just and George R. R. Martin said every answer is in the first book. That's all you need to look at, right? And to me, I don't like Bran. It's not.
You not like him better than the
I
book.
would rather choose
Some out.
Arya. I'd rather choose Cat. I'd rather choose Ned. And let's be honest,
You'd rather
people are
choose Cat. I love you. See, this is why I love Steffi. She'd rather choose Cat.
Why wouldn't she rule? She went to her family in time of desperate need. Like, come on.
She's pretty badass. Catelyn, love her or hate her, Catelyn's badass. She really is.
I'm simple like that, folks.
She just hated John. That's all we don't like her for.
It's like a chapter. We like hate her for it.
We need our own chapter. The She-Wolves ourselves. George, write it or we're going to write it.
We'll write the rest of your book, George R. Martin.
We appreciate y'all. Love you all. And good night.
Love you too.